congratulations, you're now all YouTube content creators. So, come on. Try to find something awesome so we go viral in a good way. Okay.
The 3 people that look.
We're live. All right, everyone. Welcome. I have a rare honor today to be able to chair the meeting to get us started, as we don't currently have an appointed chair or vice chair. So we do have an agenda in front of us, and I do have 3 additions to the agenda that I want to do. So one is, of course, to do that selection process for the chair and for the vice chair. And then I also forgot to mention kind of roundtable introductions, and we can do that as well, all under call to order. So are there any other additions for the agenda? Okay, do we want to just take a quick vote that everybody's okay that we add those 3 items? Thank you. So we'll say motion by you, Councillor Gilkin. Thank you. And then that is carried, and so that leads us into the selection of the chair. So with our Economic Development Committee, the way the terms of our reference are written, we can have either a councillor or one of our members at large be either chair or vice chair. So my recommendation is that we probably have one elected official in one of those roles, and hopefully one of our members at large in the other role. So with that being said, I will call for nominations from the floor for a chair. Yes, sir.
I'll move that we nominate Bruce Prestige as chairman.
Okay, very good. So 1 nomination for Bruce. Are there any other nominations from the floor? And a second call, are there any other nominations from the floor? Okay, perfect, very good. With that, I now am relieved of the honor of chairing the meeting, and we'll pass that over to our new minted chair, Councillor Prestige.
Thanks, Bruce.
Never sat here before. Okay, thank you. So now we will have somebody nominate for the vice chair. See if we can get any nominations.
My comment that I would like to make at this time, and I hope she doesn't hate me for mentioning it, but our most experienced board member at this point is Leslie.
A lot of experience.
I'll nominate Leslie for the job.
Sure. That's funny.
Second nomination? None?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You are now the vice chair.
Oh, look at that.
And
Good luck, everyone.
Congratulations, Leslie, on your appointment as vice chair.
Thank you.
So, of course, with both of those roles comes absolutely nothing other than they get to deal with me a little bit more. So I hope that that's an okay prize.
Okay, second, adoption of the agenda. Anybody like to?
Councillor Prestige or Mr. Chair, I did have added on introductions. Did you want to do introductions?
Sure,
at this point?
let's do introductions first.
A bit of a round?
Okay, we'll start over with
Art Bauer. I've been on economic development for 2 years now. Great background in science and science education. Was going to be the technical advisor to the Global Energy Conference for Woodlands County on the energy side. But due to COVID, that all got canceled. We've done a lot of work with energy futures, and I'm also a small business owner. I run a sawmill and firewood business within the county. So back again, and some great opportunities coming our way as we'll discuss in the meeting.
Welcome to our new members. My name is Lesia, and I'm not the oldest. I'm just the oldest member here. No experience, right? Like Art, I'm a retired educator. Have been for, this is my 4th year of retirement already. And in that time, I filled it with just being on volunteering within town. I'm on the Wellsprings Board and the Cancer Wellness Society, and do some time at the Repeat, or going to be doing some time at the Repeat Boutique and so forth. And between that and grandchildren and a little bit of gardening and other things, time flies. So and this is a great opportunity to learn more about the county and have a bit of a voice, which is really exciting. Thank you.
Yeah, my name is Peter Gilkin. I currently operate a bison farm just northwest of Fort Assiniboine. I've been involved in this county, this community, since I moved back here in 1978. Grew up here, and then was gone for 5 or 6 years, and then moved back in 1978 and started my family there as a dairy farmer. Did that for 10 years. Had started a trucking company at that point in time. Got out of the dairy. Still maintained the farm. Operated the trucking business for about 15, 16 years. And during that time, I also had a small sawmill that remanufactured timbers for the Japanese market, which was a very interesting experience because it got me into working with the Métis settlements up in High Prairie, Paddle Prairie, Jean Dore, White Mud, Gift Lake, and that was a really good experience and good to see how small businesses worked in those communities. In 2001, when BSE hit, bison prices plummeted to an all-time low, and so we started a meat shop. Actually became a business that we operated till 2016, I believe it was, and we hired some German sausage makers, and we developed a market in Spruce Grove, Stony Plain. We had a store, Spruce Grove store in Stony Plain. Also distributed here in Whitecourt, St. Albert, Strathcona, some in Fort McMurray. So we had established quite a business, but then when we couldn't find people, and I got too old to be cutting meat anymore, so I shut the operation down. So I've had a big interest in economic development, and I think the biggest success and failure was we did a study with Woodlands County, I believe it was in 2004 and 5, in actually vertically integrating the agriculture within the region. And that study, I think, still exists today. I don't know if you've seen it or not.
It's probably something we can try to find. I
Yeah.
think it's undoubtedly in our historic documents. I know it predates my time here as EPO, but I'll do my best to track it down.
And it was before its time. We actually, that's actually was the springboard for our business. And because the value chain itself failed miserably, we lost a lot of money. And but it was more because of inexperience, and it was long before we had a situation where people recognized how important regional food security is. So that's been my experience, and I hope I can bring some of that to the table here.
Patricia.
My name's Patricia McNeil, so I'm obviously new to the committee, so super excited to be here. I've always been passionate about economic development and new learning opportunities and so on. Myself, I manage ATEC NDT in town here. We do industrial X-ray. So I'm actually a welder by trade, and originally from the Maritimes, so I used to work tourism related and forestry work there. So I was cutting and piling pulp before I left to move to Alberta. So, and then had worked labor, oil field. So then I had a quality control consulting business. So prior to coming on to ATEC. So now I've been with ATEC for more than 10 years, I guess. And my daughter lives in Blue Ridge. I have 3 granddaughters that live there as well. So I'm really excited about some of the new opportunities that are coming, things like the boot camps and so on, these types of programs with the schools for the kids with working with trades and so on. I've seen some really great things come out of those programs, both with students applying to our business and with having kids taking part in these programs over the years. So I think that it's a really great move forward to keeping our children in our community and having them train for the jobs that we've been outsourcing. And as well, I know earlier I heard you guys discussing about living away and stuff like that, and that's something I've dealt with myself because, of course, when I was on the road and in the field, I've done the 91-day stint was the longest stint I did without a day off, like 15 hours a day. Like, you understand what these guys are dealing with. And, it's one of those things that I always said, unless you've been in the ditch with somebody kicking rocks on your head, basically, it gives you a different perspective. So I think that's something that I want to be able to bring to the table as well, is when we're having some discussions just about some of these potential work coming in and so on. I have a boots on the ground perspective from some of that end of things as well. So,
Crystal.
thanks.
My name is Crystal Wood. I'm also new to the committee, and I'm also very excited about participating in the economic development. I'm an electrician by trade. I currently have a student working through the RAP program, apprenticing with me, and that is just such a wonderful program. And I would love to see more expansion on opportunities like that. My husband and I have tried to open a meat shop in Port Assiniboine so that we can keep the family together, so he's not going away. And we ran into some struggles doing that, which is what prompted me to run for council and to join the Economic Development Board. And I think it's going to be a great fit, and I'm really excited to bring some new opportunities to the table.
Thanks.
And provide some insight into some of the roadblocks that we hit going through the process.
Thank you. I'm Bruce Prestige. I'm a counselor for Woodlands County for Division 5 Blue Ridge. Been in the area since 1997. We bought a piece of property just north of the river, and it was our personal campsite. And in 2008, we moved there full-time, built a new house. And my background is heavy equipment, trucks. I operate both. Then I moved from that into truck sales. I sold for 3 companies in Edmonton over 16 years. And when we moved out here, I kind of went back running equipment, and then I worked for a pipeline company as their equipment manager for 4.5 years. And then decided to run for council. And it's been good. And I've been on economic development for 4 years now, and it's quite enjoyable. So let's see if we can do another 4 years.
So very quickly, Bert Roach, Economic Development Officer for Woodlands County. It's hard to believe, but I was trying to do the math this morning, and this is year 18 of my career as an economic development operative, I guess I'll say. Incredibly interesting. So hopefully I bring a little bit of experience and some talent to the table, and I'm excited to be the tip of the spear to be guided in whatever direction you guys feel we need to be going. So I'm committed to doing my best for everybody. And that being said, I do have to do a bit of a shout out this morning. 10 years ago, this morning, my wife and I were in the delivery room in the excuse me, in the hospital in Provost, waiting for the arrival of our son. So happy birthday, Shane.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's cool.
Thanks. Okay, go ahead.
And introduce.
Oh, yes, and I'm sorry. And our executive producer, I don't know if the camera will go over that part to show him, but Nikita Ganovichev, our communications coordinator for the county, who is very politely taking a massive load off of my shoulders this morning. Thank you very much, Nikita. Thanks, Bruce.
I guess now we go to adoption of the agenda.
You bet. So with those three items added in, we've, I think, done the adoption, but let's move down now to the adoption of the minutes.
Okay.
So adoption of the minutes, and they are in the meeting package there. Everyone should have it electronically. I know we have printed copies in the room as well. But certainly if there's any questions about those minutes, we can sure put those forward now.
Is there any errors or omissions that anybody can see? None? You can have a motion to accept the art.
Motion to accept the minutes.
Thank you very much, Art.
Any discussion on it? None? Can we call the question, please? All in favor? It's passed. Okay, next, we have no delegations.
No, no delegations this morning. However, this is maybe a really good opportunity to ask. We know that we have a meeting with council coming up on Friday with Kiara. We have an opportunity for some of our councillors to go out to the Kiara site at Blue Ridge to take a look at the CAPS Kiara pipeline that's coming in, and it is currently having a very positive economic effect on our region. We've got about 500 employees that are part of that project that are have a daily stipend to basically spend as they see fit. So we've certainly seen a boost in our local economic activity and folks in hotels and some of that. So we'll have a chance for council to ask a bit more for questions and that kind of thing of Kiara. Is there anyone else that you guys would like us to have come in as a delegation? I know past delegations we've included groups such as Community Futures, our local Chamber of Commerce. We've possibly got the ability to maybe invite somebody from the provincial government to come in. In the meeting package, we've got information on the new hydrogen framework as well as that trails package. And we probably could engineer an entire meeting just around each of those. So it's really open to the committee to, if there's anybody that's on your wish list that you would like me to approach to bring in, we can try to put that forward, or if there's a list of 3 or 4 and we want to work out a bit of a schedule, we can do that as well.
Anybody have any ideas?
All of the things that you've listed.
Okay, well, that gives me a great starting point. Okay, so, I mean, that is certainly an offer that we can extend to Kiara, to maybe have them come and do, they are going to be doing a bit of a presentation. We've got 4 councillors and our CAO that are attending the meeting as well. I'll be there on Friday as well. But we can certainly bring some of that information back, or maybe ask for them to submit that slideshow, that kind of thing, have it come back to the committee.
And I know, because for example, a question that I would have with Kira is, it is great that they're bringing in all these people and they have, you know, their LOA to spend, but I do know specifically that there is companies in town that bid on that work that didn't get it.
Yeah.
So that's, you know, just one of the concerns kind of thing, is I'm wondering what they're doing for local content as they're going through.
So my understanding is they're working with, they've got 6 major contractors, and then they left it up to those major contractors to hire the subs. And I know that there were a number of local folks that had applied. I know there are some local companies working with it, but I know that there were also some that were unsuccessful. So in regards to getting the details of that process and all of that, we can certainly extend that question.
And more to take the information forward so that we can learn for, you know, when we're coming into another situation in the future, if there's something we could have done differently to include more local businesses, then we could catch it at the planning process with a new program that would come through.
On that, I just live, you know, a mile from where they're working at Blue Ridge. And on the one site, they hauled all the gravel in, it was all local area, gravel trucks hauling the gravel come from a local contractor in
Awesome.
Whitecourt. All their vacuum trucks and water trucks are local trucks,
Good.
so it is helping the community.
Oh, it's definitely, like, I'm completely for the project, so, and definitely a boon to the community. I just know that, I was just commenting, knowing that there's some contractors that, for example, like, that are coming through from other areas, some of the subcontracts and so on that they're bringing in from out of town that could have been provided from town. So,
I'm just looking for more transparency.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think-
just as a learning
Yeah.
forward, so
Yeah.
that if there's other opportunities where we can support our local businesses to get on those lists, that'd be great.
Anybody else?
You know, oh, sorry, go ahead. I was thinking, even the chamber, because we're a huge, that's one of our big partners, just for all of us again, where is it at post-COVID, and where are we moving forward with them?
Yeah, and it's been about a year now since we had the chamber come in to present to us, so certainly, we certainly have them on the list, and I know, I can't remember when Community Futures has a presentation in front of council. I know Michelle
Wow.
wanted to make sure that they do on it. I think it'll be probably earlier in the new year, but we can certainly add them on as well, for sure, so. So I've got CFYE, Chamber, GOA, and then the follow-up questions for Kiara.
Do you guys ever have community members come in and share business ideas? So for example,
Yeah,
I saw a Facebook post not all that long ago wondering about an indoor riding arena around Fort Assiniboine. And if there's people trying to put together ideas in different areas, is this not a good place to kind of,
it's an absolutely excellent place to bring some of those folks forward. So the way that the process usually works is we have someone that comes forward that does want to locate a business or that's looking for business resources. Usually, if possible, I like to try to be kind of the first point of contact that they have for the council. Because the whole idea, it comes back to it as we've kind of sent out within the email and sort of reiterated that A plus B equals C, right? So this is great. What do you need? What's the B? What do we need to connect you with so that you can get to where you want to go? And so I think that that's a very key part of the process. And if we have folks that are willing to kind of share their business plan and to present, and if they want to come in and be accepted as a formal delegation in front of the committee, we can certainly do that. But generally, a lot of that work happens outside of the committee part of things. But certainly, the role for us as a committee to understand some of the business inquiries that are coming in and making sure that we are matching people with the right resources and helping them to find the answers to the questions or ways to overcome the barriers that they have, that's absolutely our role. So because it is a formal public meeting, it isn't always the best place to discuss an open business idea, but we can certainly meet with anybody and try to work with them confidentially as much as they want. And if they want to have an open process, we can sure do that.
Okay, perfect.
Archie, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I was wondering if Christy Tutz could come in from Alberta Labor and just give us an update on the new employment packages, small business business owners around here, connecting them to some of those opportunities, but also to kind of get a regional perspective on just are our businesses taking advantage of that with the 20 up to 25% of the salary coverage for new hires. And other programs, so we haven't seen her for a while now.
No.
So it might be a good chance to reconnect with
I
her.
probably have 2 meetings a week with her, but you're right, we happen to have her come
For
in to
the
anything
members of the
that's
committee, yeah.
formal. So I think that's a really good idea. And then the other group that I haven't mentioned yet, of course, we did have the change this year after about 25 years or so of having oh boy, of course, the name escapes me at the moment, but at the federal level for economic development, we had a Western Economic Development, WED, and that's now been changed. They spun off BC to be kind of the Pacific part of things, and so now it's called Prairies Can as the new federal entity, and we're waiting for a new local representative. They've actually opened through Prairies Can, they'll have a Grand Prairie office, which will encompass part of our region, and we're waiting for them to hire and staff up that position. But that's one that's sort of in the back of my mind as well, that we can have a Prairies Can official come in, because that'll be the person who will connect us to the federal programming on the economic development part. And then the other GOA rep, so jobs, economy, and innovation. That's the other department that I deal with fairly routinely, and Tammy Curry is our regional representative for that group. So we could certainly ask Tammy to come in at a future date as well.
Even if you paired up Tammy with Christy, that would be a good move. And then we also haven't heard from Serge Cote on the apprenticeship board. And as our introductions indicated, and connecting with youth, there might be some opportunities to hear where the apprenticeship board is supporting our journeymen that are here today, and maybe creating some more opportunities for youth here locally.
Maybe with Surge have Charity come in from Careers Next Gen, and they could team.
Yeah, those
Yeah.
two could team, that would be,
Yeah, and
because she's new to
yeah.
careers,
Yeah.
Patricia?
I also, just kind of building on what Crystal was saying there as well, because I know I've talked to some people that had interest in that also, and what I think more the forum that they were kind of referring to was something a little more casual, like a town hall with the people I was talking to, where they could have like a roundtable town hall in maybe once a quarter in a different community, where people can ask very general questions. And if it was something like that, where you could have maybe a Christie could take part in one, or one of the other, like the apprenticeship board, if it's a different area, have a different topic for each area, but very basic level information packages for people that are looking to start businesses. Because what I was finding is some businesses that have been existing in the county, one guy I can think of in particular, who's been in business for at least 15 years, and he had absolutely no idea about the business support network. He didn't realize that he could access any funding for apprentices to work with him, and so on. So I think that there's a lot of mom and pop type organizations that they haven't been involved, they're not aware of these organizations, and they're so busy working that either they can't get out to the meetings, they don't realize it applies to them, and they just don't realize how much help that and support that there is with these organizations. So, and then the other benefit I could see from one of these types of town halls is there's also people that run businesses that won't attend these meetings. And for example, I know somebody that I spoke with, and she said, I work with animals. She said, I don't do meetings very well. Because that even said, if you're nervous to attend a meeting, like call me and I'll go with you if you want. And she said, like, I just don't interact with people very well. But if there's something that you know of that could affect my business, can you please email me? So
I so appreciate that you mentioned that, because I hear that coming from people as well. We have a lot of folks that, one-on-one, they're great, or, they're awesome on the phone, that kind of thing. But there's a lot of people that if we ask them to come in to be a delegate to this, they would freeze up. So
That's true.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh, no, that's perfect. That's what I was.
I absolutely 100% agree with you, and I can think, I've got probably 5 examples that just rushed to the front of my head as soon as you said that, so.
Peter?
Yeah, I have to agree with you guys about these, trying to figure out where we put our energy, because the demographic in Fort Assiniboine is entirely different than it would be in Anselmo or over here. And in order for us to get an inventory of ideas and things that people are interested in doing, we kind of have to reverse engineer the way that things have happened, because we have in our community, everybody always says no. And that's because they don't know. And it doesn't fit with their thought process or the way that their lives are. And so when we do this, I think it's really important that we understand that demographic and get those ideas, because there's so many things that the county can participate in supporting those ideas. And that doesn't necessarily mean that we have to have them come in as a delegation. I think it's important that we go there.
I agree.
One I would like to see some delegates from is some of our local businesses, like our sawmills, pulp mills, even the oil companies. Just come in and let us know what they're doing, or any ideas what they're coming up with in the future. I think it'd be really good information.
And we did have the business network that we were putting our meeting together for in, was it October,
Yes.
that meeting? And, you know, to speak directly to that, and I think it has to be a continued objective of the Economic
Definitely.
Development Committee, because COVID set us back in that, and we really had our key business and industry people all in the room together under some really good planning by Kurt. And as soon as some of these restrictions get lifted, we need to bring that group together and share those ideas for sure.
Maybe Bert, can you explain what we were going to do with that?
Sure. So just to kind of encapsulate a couple of years of recent history, in 2019, I believe it was, we did that spring business developers and realtors kind of get together. It was an afternoon meeting, and we had a presentation from our planning and development folks, and we had a presentation from our local real estate board. Pembina Pipelines gave us a bit of an update, but the intent and the idea was just to do exactly that, connect as well as we could within business and industry. And we didn't have that event slated again for last year and again for this year, and unfortunately due to COVID that ended up kind of going by the wayside. So when we were able to reconvene starting in September, the idea coming from the committee at that point was let's try to do change the focus a little bit, but kind of take that business developers, realtors idea and focus it just solely on industry. So we were hoping to have kind of a supper meeting where we had reps from sort of our top 15 or 20 ratepayer, industry ratepayers within the county. And we were in the beginning of the planning phases of that. We went back into the lockdown for the fourth wave. So that was sort of where that kind of got kibosh. So essentially we have kind of a 2-year gap since we've had a chance to sort of have a meeting and get in front of folks. Now I know our senior leadership team, they do have routine communications, especially with some of our higher end ratepayers and that sort of thing on the industry side as we negotiate things like road agreements and different things like that. And I know there was been correspondence back and forth, and the general tone that we're getting from heavy industry right now is things seem to be recovering, right? We're not to a point where things are absolutely exceptional, but I mean, we're all watching commodity prices and hearing the news, and especially around oil and gas, things are looking absolutely a lot more positive now than they did last year at this time. But it would be great to be able to get face to face and to actually, be in a room and talk to some of these folks and find out exactly what their needs are and what we as a municipality can be doing. Because the big thing that is on the horizon, of course, is that $150 a ton carbon tax, right? And we know that for a lot of our ratepayers, it's a game changer, right? And so we need to have some kind of a carbon discussion and some kind of a regional carbon solution, or it's going to get very expensive.
Just wanted to add on what you had mentioned there about being in contact with the ratepayers. Is there a specific list of, for example, the top 10 ratepayers and some kind of a schedule that someone has kept in contact with this group? Because that's one of the things that I heard, of course, when I was talking to people in the county. One particular ratepayer comes to mind. I won't put him out publicly, but he's they represents a large ratepayer in the county, and he said he had almost no communication with the last 4 years. So that was something that I was really concerned about is so that nobody falls in the cracks. Is there some kind of literally a schedule checkbox where you can say, okay, we did communicate with this person in whatever is a reasonable amount of time?
So I know probably the best way for me to answer that is to say our communication is better now than maybe that it had been.
Okay.
But we're always looking for opportunities to sit down and to talk to folks. So hold on, Nikita, I'm gonna play to the camera for a second. So 780-286-5774, anybody please call me, we'd love to sit down and to meet with you.
Awesome.
But yeah, that's certainly, I think, one of the key things that we need to do is to make sure that folks know that we're approachable. And whether it's at a planned meeting or whether it's just they want to phone and they want to have a conversation, we've got county staff that are available, and specifically on the economic development side, we're here to listen to your concerns, to relay them to council, and if there's something there where, we need to bring an issue or an item to council to get them to act on it or to have a full understanding of it, that's exactly the role of our committee and what we want to do. Let's try to identify barriers and break them down as best we can.
And we do have a business list. We
Yes.
worked on that list in the
Yeah,
last
so
term.
we certainly do, and this is where our biggest tool is one that we have that is in development right now. So earlier this year, we brought in a no-fee, no-cost business director, right? So with Woodlands County, because we don't issue business licenses and we don't have an annual licensing program, we do have, of course, taxation information, but we can't use that as part of our economic development stuff. So what we need to do is, in order to kind of generate a list for us of our local businesses, we have the business directory. So any business that is within the county, and even any nonprofit group, we've got, with Nikita's help, again, thankfully very much, it's on the business section of our county website, but we've got about 70 or so entries that are on there now, and that should be closer to 300 to 400. So we would love to build that out as best we can.
I agree, because that's something I was looking for, definitely was a business list, and as you say that, I think that's excellent. I'm really glad that started, and, because I know it's something, for example, that I didn't get anything at my residence asking if I had a business. So with our tax roll, for example, maybe that's something that as we're sending out our tax bills, that we should be including a newsletter with the tax bill, because lots of people don't open newsletters necessarily other times throughout the year.
Well, so this is one of the changes that we've had as well, because we used to produce a county newsletter about 3 or 4 times a year.
Yeah, I remember.
And we haven't done that now for the last couple of years. And we haven't actually done just a town hall community meeting on the economic development part of things for about 3 years or so. I think it was about this time, fall of 2018, where we did meetings in both Blue Ridge and Fort Assiniboine. But we've never actually been out to Grote Goose. And so that's, and then that includes Anselmo as well, right? I mean, we've got halls in each of those places. It certainly makes sense that we organize and do some kind of an open meeting for business to come in and contact us there. I mean, it sounds like a wonderful idea.
We did run into some reluctance with people putting their name in because they thought we were just trying to get a list so we can do a business license, and they didn't want to pay anything. So
Right.
we tried to make it very clear that that's not what we're doing, but some people are still reluctant.
So it's a work in progress.
Yeah, and I can appreciate that both.
Yeah.
I can appreciate that viewpoint is for sure. So.
Is that it? Anybody else?
And just a quick note to members of the committee, I am in a supportive role with the audit committee for Living Water School Division, and there are a couple of resolutions that they need me to chime in on, so I will kind of jump in and out, apologize for that, just with the conflict of the meeting, and I won't be too far gone, but just to help them pass a few resolutions this morning.
If you can
Yeah.
note that he,
When
when he leaves.
when Mark says that Art needs to step up, you just step back in whenever you need, and that does lead me back to something that I missed, sort of coming off the top of things. I think I had mentioned it before the meeting, but I should mention it formally as well. So Councillor Dean, of course, is our third councillor who's appointed to our Economic Development Committee. He is away at an outside conference today, and he wanted to extend his sincere regrets that he's unable to be here today. He really, really wanted to be. But he didn't really have any outstanding questions overall with the meeting agenda. But as we move into one of the new business items, if there is the decision to go forward with an agricultural kind of subcommittee with our Ag Service Board, he would love to be appointed to that. But he just wanted to make sure that I noted for the minutes and for the record that he extends his sincere regrets that he's unable to be with us this morning.
Okay, then we'll move to item number 5, strategic thinking. Take it away, Bert.
Okay, I'm gonna mark you out for 9:56.
Head up right now, and then I've been through the strategic planning package quite a bit, so I'll let you guys enjoy. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. There should be room in the lobby there, I think, for you.
Worked just wonderfully, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so to the strategic thinking portion of things, last year, we, with the assistance of Community Futures, went through a formal strategic planning process specifically for the Economic Development Committee. Now, of course, we don't operate in a vacuum. All of our guidance and everything comes from council. And so as this document was developed, what we did was we used the 2019 to 2022 council strategic plan as the basis that our plan was sort of built off of. Now we do have council, our new council in January of 2023 will be doing a new 4-year strategic plan for the county. And so once we have that in place, there's maybe the opportunity in the first quarter or the first half of next year for us to sort of take a closer look at this, update it, make sure alignments and everything is there. But I wanted to include the strategic plan and all of the background because I thought it was a fairly thorough document and would be kind of a good background and orientation. I did have a couple of folks comment, and I apologize. The print on page 35 and 36, that's actually a very hard to read document and the size that it is. But what that actually is that's the tactical business plan for the county. And so we do have copies of that available elsewhere, and I think I've sent a couple of those out to folks, but those are pardon me, some of sort of the key county items that are on the county's to-do list, so to speak. And of course, again, that's all at council approval and direction. The main page, I think, that sort of comes out of the document is the page 37. And that's really sort of the short-term and the long-term objectives. And I think that in many ways, the comments that have already been shared at this meeting address and fit in under a couple of those categories. So I'll stop there and just see if there's any comments on the strategic plan.
I would imagine, Bert, that this is a working document.
Absolutely, yes. And not to put her on the spot, but I mean, Leslie, if you have anything to add, a working document, I think is probably one of the key phrases, I think, that sort of came forward from that strategic planning session.
Very much.
So when you talk about,
No, go ahead. It's okay, go ahead.
when you talk about asset lists, what kind of things are you looking for to develop an asset list?
Excellent question. Now, I have to jog my memory a little bit.
It's like the first one under your long-term objectives.
Yeah, so I think that the kind of the main part of it there, part of that aligns with our tourism assets. And so under the project that we're working with now with Wild Alberta, we're doing some of that. I mean, we do have a bit of we certainly have a list now, but I know our advertising this year was really limited on the tourism part of things because with COVID recovery, the intent was this year's market pretty much only to county residents. We didn't really do any broader outside sort of based marketing. And all of our tourism guides that we normally are part of, none of them were available this year, right? So I think that under that, the tourism assets, a list of developable sites and developable industrial areas within the county. I think that that certainly falls under that as well. And then, of course, some of those personal assets that kind of fit in and underneath that. Going back to some of the feedback that we had heard from those community meetings we had a couple of years ago with Blue Ridge and with Fort Assiniboine, one of the things that came out of it was that, folks in both of those areas were really interested in growing their communities, but there wasn't a lot of local financial capital in order to make that happen. We had a few folks that had ideas, but if anything was going to happen, the money would end up having to come from outside of the community. And so that's kind of led us to that idea of, as we develop, where is the investment going to come from? We know that, like, traditionally within economic development, about 90% of your investment comes from folks that are already here, right? What we're finding though is that we definitely need to be aware of and be working with both markets, both our internal market and then looking at how we can attract capital and investment from outside of the county to county sites as well. So that's probably a bit of a summary, I would say. Tourism, developable sites, and then some project ideas and things that people would like to see within their communities.
And I know I did have quite a few questions through the plan, and actually had put Bert on the spot and kind of spent some time on the phone with him just going over. So he just kind of brought me up to date on what some of those were, but just a few items that I wanted to add. So with strengths, one of the things, and agriculture isn't something that I have in my background, so I know when I saw the open farm days and so on this year, it's something that I thought was a really great program. And I've seen in other areas, but one of my best friends, actually, I was telling Bert what she had done in an area was they were really focused on eating local and so on. So she had actually started a program initially where she would only eat local for 30 days. And it was kind of a big thing and blogged about it and so on. That started, I think it's about 10 years ago. And from that one person volunteering as this initiative to eat local for 30 days is now an operational food hub where people can go in online, order their groceries. They're delivered to their house from local producers, and they all go through a cooperative production facility. And it's an operating production facility with a store now. And that's where it went from just the initial movement of one person deciding to eat local, And when that's something, so when I see this, I was looking at it and I thought, and when you guys had mentioned just about the butcher shops and, things like that, I know myself, like I go to the butcher shop in town here, but there's lots of times over the years that that's a service I would have liked to attain, and I think a lot of times people just don't know where to go. Mm-hmm. So I definitely see real opportunity there for sure. Also, one of the things just wondering about as well was kind of tying into the town hall idea, what you said, like with businesses and so on, when they were talking about the benefits of doing business. This is on page 22, the long-term relationships, pick 3 to 5 events we'd like to have post-COVID to get people excited about the future. I know now there's some things from an organizational perspective, of course, that we can't do on account of the COVID restrictions still, but I think everybody is tired of waiting post-COVID. I think my view on whatever we can do is let's plan it with, in the environment that we have. If we have the opportunity to expand things, let's expand them. But instead of not planning at all. And maybe that's something virtual and stuff like that, different things that we can do.
I think that is an excellent encapsulation, and I know in the conversations we've had around the business support network table, we're seeing that with all four of the BSNs, and we've gone through it. I'll get into some of the throes of things we had to go through with the Career Expo again this year. But COVID-proofing events, as you know, using that as a baseline going forward is an excellent idea, and I think it's got to be part of our thinking. If we can do it, that we have both a virtual and an in-person component, and I mean, if we have to use screens like this, I mean, we have to make sure that, you know, at the beginning of COVID, one of the tourism conferences I attended, they said, you know, postponement is a lifeline, cancellation is death. And I'm like, yeah. I so agree with that sentiment with what we've seen and what we've seen canceled and moved around. So as a baseline, how can we COVID-proof things? That needs to be part of the thinking.
Definitely. So, also, one other question I had too, on page 23 about opportunities, they said, it's the very last task, request to do no new licenses if taxes are not kept up. So specifically, I had a question about, are any county licenses currently required for oil and gas development? So are they all provincial registrations and licenses?
So the bulk of oil and gas development is approved by the AER, by the Alberta Energy Regulator.
Right.
With the Keyera pipeline, for example, the only development permits that they need are for the sort of the above ground parts of things that are separate. So I believe they do have a development permit for their substation or for their pumping station.
Okay.
But the bulk of it for oil and gas is always goes through the Alberta Energy Regulator. And so that's where the idea of, you know, having that open relationship, getting to know, being able to communicate with our local producers, that's where the conversation needs to start, because we sometimes don't get notifications, and they don't come through our office, they actually come through planning and development. But our planning and development gets notices, and then they disseminate it throughout our admin staff. But a bulk of that, all oil and gas development is just straight through AER.
So that's something that I would say as an outcome from then municipal planning. Then should they not be giving the Economic Development Committee a report on any of these permits for that purpose?
Well, and it's something where I haven't submitted it as a formal report, but Joan Slubake, who's our manager for planning and development, Joan and I talk on a pretty much daily basis, right? And so we try to work as closely together as we possibly can. Now, most of that information gets relayed back to the committee, but we can try to do a bit more reporting there. And council with development permits, Bruce, do you remember how often you're seeing them now? Is it quarterly or is it monthly? I mean, we have at least the annual update, but I think you guys see them on a routine basis as well.
No, we see them in MPC.
MPC.
Okay. So, I mean, we can certainly bring that forward. I mean, undoubtedly, we have that kind of information within the county. So, yeah, we can sure bring those development permit numbers and some of that forward.
It's just good information to be able to disseminate to the businesses as well, depending on the size of the development. You know, if they're just putting in, you know, an above ground header and it's just a small little station, it doesn't have a big impact. But if it's something else that's of substantial nature, it may.
Yeah, I know we have a running total, and I think I've done in the past sort of year-end annual updates where we've brought those numbers to this committee, but we can do it on a more routine basis for sure.
If you can, Bert, like at MPC, our development permits come from building a deck to
Yes.
building, you know, a compressor station.
Yeah,
So if you could get just the business-related ones,
absolutely.
That's true.
I would say that works both ways too. Because when our businesses are, you're the first point of contact for our businesses.
I won't say I always am. I try to be, and I hope to be.
You want to, right?
Yes.
That's the direction that we're
Yeah.
supposed to guide people to. So that is the direction that we followed. And we talked to the economic development officer at the time, and he was super excited about the opportunity for us to start a business. And then you move into the planning and development subdivision boards. And you get a totally different answer, and there's no crossover.
It's the planning and development process, I mean, it's all legislated through the MGA, right? But it can be daunting, and this is where I think every municipality sort of struggles in how do you marry that role between development and economic development, because you've got to be able to make sure that the investment fits. You have to follow through on the procedures from the MGA. And I know in the case with your development, it was a little bit even more involved because there were provincial components. We mentioned AER and highways and all of that. And when you get into those things, it's kind of like moving it from level 1 to level 5 to level 10. It just increases the difficulties, right? So I mean, ideally, you hit the nail on the head. How do we best work together? How do we help to minimize those barriers or help folks to understand them so that we have positive outcomes rather than neutral or negative?
Right. Because even the provincial regulations seem like they're pretty standard for people that are in economic development and planning. But for Joe Blow wanting to start a business, those aren't standard things that you deal with. So having somebody to talk to that can kind of give you a broad spectrum of what you're gonna need to do would be great. And it should start at this level, if that's the level that you want people to come to.
Absolutely.
Peter? Well, and my experience, Bruce, as well, is that, especially dealing with transportation, is that they, I don't think, quite understand that it's not about putting roadblocks in place, but it's trying to figure out how to get around the roadblocks. And I think it serves a purpose for us to entertain the idea of putting some kind of a structure together that if there are roadblocks, that we have some kind of a team approach to figuring out how to get around those.
I think that makes absolutely perfect sense. And like I said, I know Joan and I work together as closely as we can on a number of things. And I think probably the most recent example would be one that came forward. We had a local gentleman going through the process of he had to make a change to some zoning, basically, to have a cabin development come forward. And I know on that, Joan and I had met with him several times. We worked pretty closely to help him to define and to understand the process, and we did have a positive outcome on that one because it came down to being a council vote, right? So there's proof there that we can do the team approach and work together that way, but I will reiterate that team approach. I really like that. Thank you.
I'm just curious if there's been any mechanism or process to review past applications. So say, for example, like what you had mentioned with yours, then that poses a question to me. Say, if I wanted to ask in the last 5 years what businesses have brought ideas forward, and out of that 5 years, how many of those businesses were able to bring their ideas to fruition? Are they still there? Is there, and looking at it for the ones that weren't, even the ones that were successful, can we basically send them a survey and ask, what went well, what didn't go well? Do you have any recommendations going forward? And that could kind of highlight for us the difficulties that these business development ideas have had so that we can take them and implement them quickly to hopefully cut red tape for the new businesses coming in the future.
Excellent point, great question, and we don't have a formal process that does that currently, but a common tool is that when a business is leaving an area, you sometimes, if you can get them to do it with you, will do a bit of an exit interview, right? And so doing a post-development interview with someone who's had a development permit that's been turned down or been abandoned, that makes sense. We don't do that currently, at least not in a formal way, but that certainly makes sense to add that to our, I'll say, we'll add it to our project list or to the to-do list, but yeah.
And I would just invite that process to be not necessarily an interview, maybe the option for an interview, but also an option for like a written submission. Because if a person has gone up, you know, their businesses or their dreams, the kind of thing. So if all of a sudden this isn't happening, they may not be, you know, very interested in a face-to-face interview over why it didn't work. It might be more suitable for it to be something that's in writing or question submission, something like that.
Oh, Art first.
Well, and to be fair to Alberta Transportation, we have had some development requests come forward, and that could have created some potentially dangerous situations as they interact with our highways. And in part of the discovery process of these businesses trying to set up, I think we've actually served the county members well by listening to the advice that has come by to Alberta Transportation. Often these are discovery elements to a development permit, and of course we have that development permit process and the appeal process in place. So when the one that I'm particularly familiar with, Alberta Transportation, did provide us with sound advice as to how to move forward, the developer decided not to move forward because they didn't want to incur the cost of even doing the research. And in that case, that discovery process for these businesses are what we want to try and mitigate. I think as we move forward, how can we help a new business that wants to do a development actually connect with these individual groups where we're not the front line for that, but we're providing the information for them to do a sound and thorough research before they move ahead with a development either application or process. So if we can help them in those earlier stages, it's not a surprise when you get to the development stage and then new information comes forward and now the whole thing's on the rocks, right?
Absolutely.
So there are some checks and balances in that application and appeal process that serve the county very well. And if we can, connect through BERT and bring them to these other organizations that they need to think about along the way as they develop their business plan, and that makes that application process a lot smoother because any delay is always a concern, right?
Just to shed a brief light on, you had mentioned about boot camps.
Oh, yes.
And at the boot camp, there was an opportunity for some young entrepreneurs to put forward a business idea, right?
Yes.
And so with that said, the county did, looked at how the business plan is and trying to help young people. I think she was 16 years old from Blue, trying to get the understanding of how do you create a business plan and how do you submit it and what are some of the, which is really great for someone that age, even though her mom owned a business, et cetera, and so forth, to her to have that little bit of experience. And we just had discussed that, how can we support young entrepreneurs, which is all the same package, because we want to retain, people in our county to keep us viable and sustainable. So you had mentioned boot camps, and I thought of that young entrepreneur and trying to help them, because there are roadblocks. All of a sudden, she didn't have money for the license, right? Isn't that right?
Yes, and so that was actually a decision that our committee had come to last fall, and it is one of our budgeted items for next year. We've got $450 in the budget for youth development permits. So if we have a youth who's under 18, comes forward with a business idea, we have a small process set up. If they're willing, we'll certainly have them come and do that formal presentation.
But they don't have to.
But we kind of thought it might be easier if they just present to myself and maybe one of our committee members. And then, if they've got a business plan that's formulated and they're ready to go, We can't approve their development permit, but we could fund their development permit. So it would help them to offset that $150 cost. And then they would go through the regular development permit process of they may be approved, they may not be approved based on
Yeah.
all of the criteria that need to be considered. But at least from the county perspective and from our ECDEV committee perspective, we're providing a bit of support for young entrepreneurs.
My granddaughter was one of the winners of the entrepreneurship
Oh,
boot
is
camp
it?
thing.
Okay,
I
so you
was-
know about it, yes, so, which is great.
So it's an
And there's
excellent
lots to
program.
learn.
And yeah, and I absolutely love what you mentioned, to promote young people to have the opportunities with less barriers to get these businesses off the
Yeah.
ground.
And if they learn one thing, perfect, sorry.
Now, we haven't actually had anybody come forward on that program yet. This young
But-
lady, she's still in the process with her permit, but that's the most recent
Yeah.
update I have. But
I think it's great.
again, if you're a young entrepreneur and trying to find a play to the right camera angle, we are always looking for young entrepreneurs, and we're willing to help with the development permit cost. So.
Hey, Peter?
One of the things that is really interesting for me is that a lot of times small businesses run into the problem of, doing an assessment, and there needs to be some kind of an inventory development of previous assessments that have been done, so that we start to understand that we don't have to redo them at another cost, with another delay, because there's, especially in the case of these guys, their business, I was fully aware of some information that was there that they would have had to revisit. And so I think it's really important that we start to understand that, even with transportation, there are situations that are exactly the same as others that have been, so why are we asking those businesses to reinvest a whole pile of money to do the same study?
So like a mentorship?
No, I think it has
Is
to
that
be
what-
Like
an inventory of information.
Okay,
So
Yeah,
like
you can get-
our highway
yeah,
information that they wanted us, our research, was gonna be $10,000 to $15,000, just to count cars for the week.
oh, lovely.
And that information already exists.
Oh,
Right.
And this is where I have a struggle with a lot of this stuff that gets stored in silos, because it really restricts small businesses. The big businesses is not an issue, but the small business, it really restricts them. An example is now with Slaughterhouse, for example. I believe it's High Prairie, and I'm not sure. I'll have to research this a little bit more. That owns a mobile slaughter facility that can go out to the farm and do the work there. And it's provincially, I think it's even federally licensed, because we participated in developing that. And I think Big Lakes, somebody there bought it, and it just sits right now. And part of the existing or extension of that was that there needed to be docking stations within municipalities that had small meat shops that needed that service, that they could use it. And that all stalled out. So where is that information? How come that doesn't exist in our economic development strategies now? Because now it's actually important, because we're starting to understand that the supply chain isn't as secure as it used to be.
So just a question here, when you said the strategy, is it something to put in this document, or I'm just trying to figure out, because this is really, I've never owned a business, my husband owns trucks and so forth, but when I'm hearing this, I'm going, there's probably a lot of people, so does it belong in this document, or is it I don't understand where it fits?
And that's what I don't quite understand
okay.
is myself, is where do we put this?
Or is this a whole nother thing to talk about?
Bert?
My suggestion would be on all of this discussion, and again, this is kind of what I've had in the back of my mind, but we have, so the next section is those key performance indicators, and I think that these would all be excellent things to add as goals under those KPIs. So what I've got so far are things like, the COVID-proof events. How do we bring forward a monthly or regular report of business and development permits? What can we do to promote local foods? We've got the information about developing the asset list. How can we do a review of past applications? How can we leverage existing info? I think all of those can be added under that KPI list if that
okay.
sounds like a good idea.
One last question.
Yeah, I think that sounds great, but when you had said about how can it be, the information be accessed, literally, I would think now it can be put online and redacted for whatever is, of course, FOIP. But if all of a sudden, if you're gonna, want to open a butcher shop, maybe you can literally go to butcher shop online in that category and all the applications that, previously have existed for this, redacted information, of course, like I said, taken into consideration, can look it up. If you want to open a trucking company, then maybe you can go through and these are some of the highlights of the other ones. So then, like you said, you're not redoing all this information all the time. And I think that's a way of growing and making the county a lot more attractive place to do business, because as they're doing their feasibility research, then they can log on and say, oh, okay, well, there was 20 other applications that tried this business and only 2 were successful. Maybe this isn't the best place for my energy. And maybe, stuff like that. It could be, I would think, something easily available online, and the person could do their own research, and then you're not using necessarily county resources for business people to do this research.
Okay.
So this is something where I have to investigate a little bit. My understanding, so there might be some FOIP issues here, but my understanding is once development permits come forward to MPC, they become public, and all of the information within them generally becomes public. Some will have a confidential component, but any of those public components, we don't have them available to be searched online. But I think if we receive the inquiry from someone, we could probably refer them to any of those past permits that have been made public through that formal process. Where we run into a bit of an issue is when permits are, they're in that process, but they haven't actually come to MPC, because then at that point it isn't public information, right?
Right.
So, but I think for anything that is already public info, I don't know how we would set it up for it to be a searchable database. I can certainly inquire. I just have a big question mark over my head wondering how we can do it. But it doesn't mean that we can't. I just simply don't know right now.
Yeah.
Okay, I think it's time to move off on this one. I could be here all day.
It's a good discussion, though.
Yes, let's,
It is.
so we can get a motion on
RCT.
County Economic Development Committee accepts the documents presented as information. Can we get a motion on that?
So moved.
Okay, Peter? Any discussion on that? Call the question. All in favor? Passed. Next is item 6.1, Government of Alberta Rural Development Strategy Public Engagement Survey.
One second here. Get caught up to and then just to note for the minutes as well, member at large Bauer has stepped out again for a couple minutes.
He's back.
Oh, he's back.
Now
He's back. There we are.
And that is now concluded, so I won't be jumping in again. Thank you, everyone, and I apologize for the inconvenience.
No problem. So just for the record, I noted you were out from 9:56 to 10:16, and then from 10:28 to 10:30.
Thank you.
Okay, that makes up part of it. Okay, so, item 1 under new business, the recommendation, of course, before you is, the committee accepts the item as information and we provide input to the government of Alberta to assist with the development of the rural development strategy. So under the rationale and terms that are there, we were approached by Kathy Curry, who as mentioned is our rep of job planning and innovation. And there is the open survey that's available. The survey link is there, and if you haven't already, I invite each of you to please submit your information through that individual survey link. But as part of the engagement process, they were actually having about 20 small invitation-only public engagement sessions. And so on November 3rd, I was invited to participate in one of those sessions. Rhonda Huff, who deals for Whitecourt, and Dana Severson, formerly of our committee and our Whitecourt Chamber, was on with the call as well. And so we were able to present, I think, some really good local and regional info. And it really revolved around those 4 questions that are related a little bit further down. The highlights, after talking to our management team, because I did have the opportunity to present these to some of our managers at one of our management team meetings, was the number 1 item was just more money needed for rural infrastructure. So roads, bridges, all of that good stuff that we maintain as a county, that was item number 1. I also very much highlighted that we need to make sure that the REITAs are fully funded. Our REITA, not just our REITA, but all of the REITAs in the province had a reduction in funding at the beginning of this year, and that's affected the operations of a lot of them. Our executive director that had been in place with the Growth REITA for 10 years basically moved on to different pastures because of the reduction in operating and that part of it. And so it's caused a bit of a struggle this year, I think, for some of the REITs. The other important things we're mentioning, the importance of having a provincial plan or provincial networks around energy, which we saw the announcement yesterday on the energy grids, which was kind of interesting and I think really exciting for us. Unlimited local use is, I think, my new favorite phrase now when it comes to local power, because we have a few natural gas companies and some other folks that I think might be very interested in being able to provide whatever they can locally behind the fence. So there's some interesting possibilities that come out of that. But the idea of developing a provincial hydrogen grid, a provincial carbon sequestration grid, and upgrading our provincial energy grid, all those things to fuel the energy transition going forward. Those were all kind of key items. Then we also talked a little bit about land use. The other key item that I mentioned is, and it equates back to some of what we've talked about today with the AER. When oil companies and gas companies are given access to the resources, they have access to the underground, but they only have a lease to develop that site for pulling out the underground resource. They have to go through a different leasing process if they want to try and do a companion business on the surface. And so the idea that we put forward was, is there a way to simplify that? And one of the other counties, a little bit further north of us, they had sort of started off on that discussion because they have a lot of green land. So the green land is the stuff that's the provincial forest. And it's very hard to attract development in when you have to convert crown land into white developable land and identifying industrial sites and all of that. And so there was a fair bit of conversation around how do we make that process easier. And then business supports, promoting and having sustainable rural population that's demographically diverse, both with age, ethnicity, education levels, all those kinds of things. What are some of those other key sustainability things? That was all stuff that was part and parcel of what we brought forward and what was discussed as part of the engagement session that I was at. And then, of course, there's the 4 questions there and the opportunity for everybody to submit your own information through that survey as well. And we can certainly spread that survey out a little bit more to county residents and all of that. We haven't done that yet, but I wanted to present that to the community.
I did just have one question about this. Just wondering, when you had mentioned the green areas and so on, and I've been hearing, of course, talk about carbon offsets with forest and so on. How many acres or hectares of forest does Woodlands County have?
So the county itself, I can't convert it to acres or hectares, but I can tell you in square kilometers.
Okay.
We're a little bit bigger than Prince Edward Island in regards to our total square kilometers. What that means on the carbon sequestration side, I don't know, because there was a new study that came out last week that said that they're finding now that, the soil that we have in our boreal forests could hold up to 4 times more the amount of carbon than what they ever expected before. And so the question is going to be is how, if in any way, does that convert to being carbon credits? And do our forestry management areas in any way convert to being carbon credits? Now, 3 years ago, at one of the economic development conferences I was at, we had the Pembina Institute state that Canada is in a terrible position with the boreal forest for carbon storage, because if there's ever a fire, all of that carbon is suddenly released, and they're actually a carbon drain rather than a carbon sink. So it depends who you believe. And at this point, I don't know if there's a clear federal policy on how our forests are going to be recognized, but it's a great point, and it's a discussion that we somehow need to be part of, but I don't know the best way forward.
Peter?
The other one is the agricultural component. Has there been any discussion on that? Because I know there's a lot of information, and it's American information in the National Soil Conservancy on carbon capture and as to how pasture land, forage land, grain land fits into that equation.
Excellent question, and I have to admit, I do not know off the top of my head. I know through Dawn and I, we can probably find you some answers. But this is something that with the RMA conference coming up, it might be a great question for council to bring to RMA as well. If you have a chance to speak with Ag and Forestry, to just say, hey, how is carbon storage being recognized within those two industries? Because I have to admit, I don't know, and I haven't really seen anything on it yet.
I just know with the carbon storage, from what I've been reading about it, and from what I understand, there isn't clear guidelines yet, but it sounds like it's certainly coming soon. So it's just something from an economic development perspective that I think we need to have this on our radar and just really understand that for once, the trees might be worth more standing. And don't get me wrong, I mean, I'm absolutely for managed forests and so on. I think it's incredibly important. So I love that our community is diverse that way, and with our lumber and so on, with the industries we currently have. But specifically what I mean is the areas that aren't managed forests. So that's a difference. So just in looking at the carbon, so we have that on our radar going forward about what the programs could be.
And that might be a great future delegate item as well. Maybe Ag and Forestry coming in to talk a little bit about that, or if there's anybody from the fence, because there's undoubtedly we know the carbon tax is real. We know carbon credits and carbon trading is real, and I think the best that we understand that is the best way to proceed. So makes sense.
Art?
Yeah, and just to further that, I know we're still in early days on where agriculture and forestry will fall in the carbon capture picture, but it may not all be positive. There are certainly some challenges that agriculture specifically has already been identified in recent work, that a carbon neutral agriculture with intense livestock operations may present some unique challenges to that industry. So it's good that we keep an eye on that, look for some opportunities to go carbon neutral. But I want to draw the committee's attention to some of the work that we've done on energy futures, and is mentioned by the Rita in your notes here, and that was the rural internet capabilities, which continue to be a serious issue for our county, and the networks for electricity, hydrogen, and carbon sequestration. And the unique geology of this area means that Woodlands County has some unique opportunities and challenges that go with those opportunities on bringing economic development, especially in the hydrogen and the sequestration parts of that. So the committee has done a fair bit of work on this in the past 2 years, and we're hoping to lever that forward in a very positive way on the development side. So I like that Rita is watching this very closely, and there is a network of provincial and municipal groups that are keeping an eye on this, and we should as well.
So that's it.
In regards to that, I was going to bring up about the internet, because you've seen it a couple times through your, we have had a couple presentations on the possibility of internet, and then I do believe there was a kind of a halt waiting for the provincial government to come out with a rural plan. Is that correct? Or
Yes.
has things shifted? Do they have a plan? I haven't looked.
I haven't seen any updates specifically. The province had put $150 million towards funding rural internet projects. Council did have a meeting with TELUS, and one of the follow-ups with that was for myself to arrange a meeting with them as well. And we're kind of on hold with that. TELUS was moving their office, and they were waiting until after the election. But I hope we'll have a chance to kind of speak with them directly as one of the telecoms. And I think the federal election as well put on hold. We did have a couple of applications that came in. There's kind of those two national funds. There's the broadband fund, which is through the CRTC, and then there's the other fund, which is through the federal government directly. And we did have a number of local applicants that went in for those, but I haven't heard anything back.
I think internet is a huge thing for our area, for economic development, or for kids at home, for schooling and so forth.
It's literally become a safety issue.
Oh, well, when some guy from El Salvador tells me, who's looking on Google Net, oh, your house is surrounded by trees, you'll never have good reception. I'm thinking, well, hello. You're there, I'm here. There has to be a solution.
From what I'm gathering is this isn't just a Woodlands problem.
Yeah.
It's a federal problem. And we need the direction from the federal government to implement something to get it started.
Okay.
And it's not so much the province, it's federally.
So
That's
the-
interesting.
The federal CRTC guideline, again, is that, they have, I believe they want 95% of Canadians or 90% of Canadians to have access to that, 50 on the download, and I believe it's 10 on the upload by 2030. And so that's sort of where those two big federal programs that have come in on part of that. Now, most of our county has internet that is close to that, but there's kind of sort of two big next steps. The first one is if you go to the Canadian Internet Registry Association site, so it's the CIRA, C-I-R-A site. If you Google CIRA speed test, that is where they get all of their information from. So as the federal government is allocating funds, they do the allocation for their funds based on the cells that they've identified through that CIRA speed test. So if according to the CIRA website, your speeds are above, then your area isn't eligible for that federal funding. If your areas on that CIRA speed test are below, then if they have an application that comes in that would provide better service to your area, then they can start to consider it for their funding process. And so that CIRA website is incredibly important, and I do encourage all county residents, do a CIRA speed test, CIRA speed test. If you Google that, it'll come up. You can put in the information. That's the best way for us to get the record of where our internet is at right now. Right?
Thank you.
So how does that-
The other workaround is, of course, right now we do have the satellite-based internet that is available pretty much everywhere in northern Canada now. So that includes our area. So through Elon Musk, and the name escapes me off the top of my head, I can probably find it very quickly. But we do have at least one provider that provides satellite-based internet that's at least at 120 megabytes on the download. It's about $800 or so to buy your dish and to get set up. But then it's reasonable from what we've heard. Art, maybe, because I know Northern Gateway has been using it. I think Living Waters maybe has as well, Lesia.
I've heard good things about it through Northern Gateway, through Malcolm has it, yeah.
So from what I've heard from the people that I know that are on that system, it seems to work. So if there is a business or somebody that needs an immediate workaround, that technology may already be there. But certainly the best is people being able to have access through some kind of a landline. Internet directly to the home is undoubtedly the superhighway, and that's always been the end goal, right? But
Oh, sorry.
So for our areas of the county that don't have internet at all, how do they provide input to this Sarah speed test?
excellent question. If they don't have access at all, I don't know how you would do that, whether you could do it through your phone. That might work, but that's an excellent question. And I don't have an answer for you.
Really?
Yeah.
What did the kids do during COVID?
Are there community hubs? Are there like internet hubs in every community where, for example, like I'm just thinking in Blue Ridge, I think the library is one. I'm just wondering about Goose Lake and Selmo, Fort of Assiniboine, those areas.
So through the libraries, yes. The community halls are certainly an option. We don't currently have internet in through all of the halls, and it isn't something that we've actually raised to that council level to say, you know, maybe those can be used as a resource or as a community hub. So that's certainly part of a discussion that we can have and we can put forward. Yeah, but I mean, we don't have a county designated hub in designated areas throughout the county currently.
Like Blue Ridge, they have fiber optic. Only because the main line that comes out of Grand Prairie, they run it down the old Blue Ridge Road here, and then back to Highway 43, and we got to tie into it.
Oh, okay.
But to get good internet, you need fiber.
Right.
And a lot of the small communities just don't have it.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and even for most of the proposals that we saw coming from internet providers of various sizes that, you know, were wanting to upgrade and then submitted service, most of it was kind of that 4G or 5G Wi-Fi, right? So I mean, again, we're back to line of sight and all of that, but that's kind of the next logical step in it, right? And for a lot of the areas that aren't currently covered, going to some kind of a regional wireless network is probably what's most likely. That's what most internet providers are probably going to end up putting forward.
So currently it's a barrier to business for sure in those areas.
For some parts of the county, I would say definitely, and we know that some parts of the county are better served than others. And yeah, I mean, we're no different than any other part of rural Alberta that way. It's certainly an ongoing barrier, shall we say.
It's all about money.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Just to add on that, council has many times pushed for rural internet, and we run into that roadblock that we need the federal government to implement a Canada-wide program.
It's good to know. So we can push our MPs.
The MPs, yeah. Okay, can I get a motion on this?
So, yeah, basically, again, the recommendation is to accept the item as information and that everyone provide input in with the development of the rural development strategy.
Would you like to make that motion?
I'll make that motion.
Any discussion, or no, call the question?
Okay.
All in favor? Passed. Next would be,
The budget.
take it away, Bert.
Thank you very much. So, the recommendation, of course, is to provide feedback on the proposed 2022 budget, and then recommend it to Woodlands County Council for approval. So, as you go into the background, our target amount, because we are allowed, basically through council direction, to have a 1% proposed increase in our total operating over where we were last year. So that means our target number on our budget to 229,201 for the economic development budget. And there is the line item detail that's there. There was also another document that gave a bit more detail that was attached. We could kind of go line by line through the budget, but I certainly appreciate any and all feedback. I guess the part of things that I can say with the budget is that it's tiny, but it is what we can afford. And so, in regards to that whole conversation about making the economic choices, there were a couple of things that are in this budget that I did have to eliminate that were items that we funded this year. One is one of the items that's under the updates. So the advertising in the Invest in Alberta magazine. Their ad rates, it's a fantastic magazine, but their ad rates are incredibly high. They're undoubtedly the highest that we face for any publication that we're in as the county. And so there was a $2,500 line item there that as I was searching for ways to reduce, that was sort of one of the first things that came out. The other thing that came out that's significant, and I haven't had a chance to really speak to the chamber about it yet, but we also had a $2,500 line item in for the chamber's annual economic forum. Now, we do have within the budget the chamber membership at the platinum level, so that has us recognized on all chamber advertising and all of that. But again, it was one of those items where I had to reduce things a bit, so it was a $2,500 line item just for that specific event. And so I pulled that event off, so that's one that isn't currently in the budget. Now, the chamber forum with COVID, it hasn't gone forward for each of the last 2 years. And so we don't know what the status of it is going to be. I think, they probably will be planning for 2022. But that being said, if there is a financial ask that we need to put up for that, we can kind of address it at that point in time. So those were two of the big things where they're kind of completely out. Everything else I had to move some things around and make a few reductions. The other significant ones were on conferences. In the past, we've budgeted to attend either the EDAC or the IEDC conference, which is either the federal or the international economic development conference. That's been completely removed, as well as the related expenses for travel and for the daily amounts. The agricultural forest products AFP conference, that's also been removed. So basically what's there for conferences is we have for the EDO budget for me to attend the Economic Developers of Alberta annual conference, and budget for me to attend the Global Petroleum Show. On the committee side, there's budget there to be able to send one person to the EDA conference, one person to the Global Petroleum Show, and then one person to the Growing the North conference, which is put on by the Grand Prairie Chamber, but that's one that we have been sending a committee member to. And so it kind of takes some of those other ones out. The concern I have, and again, this falls under those other item updates, but there has been a hydrogen conference announced in Edmonton, and that will happen in April of 2022. And with the budget in the current form that it's in, we just do not have the ability to send somebody to attend. There is, however, the possibility that if there's someone from council that wishes to attend, we could have a councillor that would want to go, and maybe they would want to absorb that cost of their training budget. But that's something that we can address a little bit further on. Those are probably the main points I think from it. All of our funding is in place there for the annual career expo, for the career boot camps. That money remains. We've got money there for parades, for the parade funding for attending the Chamber of Commerce Trade Fair, which we hope will be back as an annual event this year. Yeah, questions?
So I can appreciate that the county doesn't have a bunch of money to send delegates to these events. Is there any way that we could get a list of events though, this hydrogen conference is one that I would be willing to pay to go to. But it would be nice to go as a delegate of Woodlands County and pay your own expenses, but still have the ability to use the title.
And I can absolutely, for our next meeting, have an annual events list ready for you, for
Awesome.
sure.
Awesome. I know, I have a number of questions, actually, just in regard to this as well, but the first one, and the same thing, I understand, you know, with the fiscal situation and so on the last couple of years especially, but a question that I have is the 229,000, how does this compare to other regions? And specifically, my focus meaning, not just necessarily dollar for dollar, but percentage-wise. If we're spending 1/100th or 1/10 on economic development of our other competing areas, then that's something I think we really need to be aware of, or maybe we're in line with.
I don't have those numbers in front of me today, but again, that's something that we could bring back for the next meeting. There are maintained provincially some, they call them the financially, the thick graphs anyways, but they offer comparatives from one municipality to another, and so we can certainly, I can provide some benchmarking for the next meeting, so we can take a look.
Okay, that would be awesome. Then specifically, I did have just a couple of notes on the line items. One was, so on page, well, this one shows up as 3 of 7 under economic development projects. So for business retention, is that advertising? Business retention shows $1,500.
Yes, so that was one of the other areas where we had to make a significant amount of adjustments. We have one new event, so hold on, I'm sorry. I know the item you're referring to, I just need to find it. So
Oh, page 56 of 133, sorry.
that's okay. 56, there we go. Yes, so under the event advertising, in the comparative to previous years, this was one of those areas where I had to pull a fair amount out. For event advertising, traditionally, for the trade show, for any of our other events and that kind of thing, that's sort of where we've had $1,000 towards that. The investment attraction and business retention, those were both reduced by a couple $1,000s each for a couple of reasons. One, the youth development permits, I priced in there because it's actually priced in under projects, but it is it's advertising / projects, so that's why it's in under that heading. But we did have this year for the first time, and again, I can point to my colleague Nikita here, a very successful county photo contest. So the hope is that we can do that on an ongoing basis. It really did quite a bit, I think, to fuel some excitement. And we have some excellent social, or excellent electronic photos and things like that we can use and have been using for social media and for all kinds of things. And so we've had to move some of the other advertising money towards that photo contest, as well as some of the other stuff was moved elsewhere. So I'm convinced that there's enough there that we can accomplish all that we need to do. It's just that it's going to be thin. It's going to be 1 ad instead of 4 ads or 3 ads.
Right. With the photo contest, I did see, like I had that circled here as well. I know it was very well received, and it's actually, in my opinion, a really great way to get excellent pictures that we can use as promotional materials, like you had mentioned. The only recommendation I'd have there, wondering, is this is a cash prize, from what I understand, right?
Yes.
Going forward, is that something we could look at having as white court bucks instead of a cash prize?
We certainly can take a look at that. Where Nikita and I had the conversation on that, and where we arrived at just doing the cash this year is, with our geographic area being as large as it is, and because you didn't have to be a county resident in order to participate in the contest, your photo had to be in the county, but you don't have to be a county resident, right?
Right.
And so that was where we thought, for the first year, because it's the inaugural year, we'll just do cash prizes. but that's something that we can certainly revisit going forward. The other chambers that we're part of within the region as well, there may be an opportunity to put forward not just the white cord bucks, but if someone's from Barhead,
Perfect.
maybe there's a Barhead equivalent or a Swan Hills kind of equivalent to that. So that's a piece that we can certainly take under advisement as we're looking at refining the structure of the project for next year.
Perfect. So,
Something with that, there's parts of the county that those people just don't come to Whitecourt.
of course, yeah, and no, that makes perfect sense when you said Barhead, so.
I think to simplify it for us, the cash is easier. We can go to any town they want then.
Yeah. No, gotcha. And just what I was thinking, like you said, if there's different things with cash, like if there is areas like that, that they can be given as prizes that are gonna bring these people back to our communities to spend money is always a good thing too. And that actually wrapped up my questions on the budget, sorry. Thanks.
Any more questions on the budget?
Is there, like, I noticed that there's zero revenue generated by the Economic Development Committee.
So classically with economic development, we're not a revenue generating portion of the municipality. There's ways for us to address that. And again, we could actually probably build an entire meeting around that. So I welcome that idea and that thinking, and currently in the budget, we're not allocating for any revenue, but should we be able to generate some, that's certainly an opportunity.
It just seems like a good way to, like, when Patricia's talking about how much of our budget we get allocated from the county, seems like a good way to be able to track some of the work we're doing and be able to point to it and say, this has been really positive. We've been able to generate some income here. I do get that it's not supposed to be a money generating business, but it was just a
Well,
thought.
with that being said,
Great.
there are several revenue streams from looking at ways for us to be able to leverage county assets for advertising for corporate partnership, to doing events that are revenue generating, to, looking at other grant income and other things like that. Those are all certainly things that we can consider on that revenue side of things. Like I said, we could probably build an entire meeting around that idea of how do we generate things revenue generating, or it's maybe something we bring to a strategic planning session.
Just something quick. Safety footwear?
Yes.
Like, maybe I'm just not thinking right. I just don't know, like,
No, so
Little's
that's
pretty good here.
that is for yours truly. So I do get my $200 a year boot
Oh,
allowance.
that's what, okay.
Yeah, so the idea with that is that I can get the fanciest steel-toed high heels that I want to get.
Well, I was looking for, I thought it must be for you, but I'm going like, but, okay.
Yes, and I have to admit, while I rarely wear my boots, I have to admit the cool thing in working for the county, because in previous places I've worked, this has always been the attire, right? But what's fun is when I get to shed this and I get to put on the busy vest and the yellow hat and boots. That's pretty cool. I don't like to have rocks kicked on my head, but I understand the analogy.
I had it circled on my list as well. The only reason why I was gonna say, well, you don't need a new pair of boots every year, but you probably need coveralls.
Well,
So maybe you want to change it to PPE allowance.
well, and then we can certainly consider doing that. So, yeah, that's where that part of it is.
But it's important that you have that, because when we ran work experience and route
Oh, yeah.
programs with the School of Visions, when we went out to visit business industry, it's PPE only on those
Yeah.
sites, and that's gotta be, when you step out of your office, you've gotta be following their
yeah.
protocols, and we need to support that. Can I ask a question about the budget? I know that, and I discussed the budget with Bert ahead of today's meeting. We actually spent some time on the phone going through it and some line by line stuff. And the hydrogen conference in Edmonton, especially as it relates to our geology in this area and our potential for carbon capture, work that we've been working on for a couple of years now with the Energy Futures Institute. I would like to send a delegate, or have council send a delegate on either behalf of council or have a member from here attend that conference. And what do you think is the best way to do this, Bert? Should it be pass the budget and then make a recommendation to council later? I mean, I'm looking at that parade candy line
I
for
know, that's what I was
$2,000,
thinking
and I'm going,
That's-
if I had to find $2,000 to send that as it relates to the economic development, sorry to the kids for the candy, but I think that's one. Would I make an amendment to the budget to lose that line and then have it put forward for the purposes of that conference under appropriate budget lines, or do we just leave the candy line alone and then make a recommendation after the budget's passed to council to send a representative? I'm sorry, that was the best that I could come up with on
I was
that
thinking the
whole
same
budget.
thing. I agree.
I think that should come out of recreation candy for the parades,
Absolutely.
not economic development.
Yeah.
So that's something maybe Bert can make a recommendation to council to change.
I think that would be a great motion for the committee, and then we can bring that.
Go for it, Art.
Because I would like to make that recommendation, that line come from recreation, and that we designate
Well, so we actually, we don't have a recreation department, but both for the parade and for candy. I mean, the only kind of other relevant area within the current structure we have for the county would maybe be community services. And I'm trying to think, do either of you serve on community services? No, so I'm not sure, because I know they're going through the process of putting their budget together and forward and everything right now as well.
Well, I'm okay with the float being under the economic development umbrella, honestly, promoting the county through that. I'm just looking at, we were held within a 1% restriction on our budget. We've made a number of reductions to stay within the framework of the budget as per the direction of council. But this hydrogen opportunity, as it relates to the work of the committee in the past 2 years, is one that we should have a delegate, or the county should have a delegate at. And if we can move the candy part to community services and keep the float, we're still supporting the float, but we're also, I think, speaking to some of the work the committee has done by having a delegate or one or two delegates at the hydrogen conference. And it's not like it's in Ontario, it's in Edmonton. So let's take advantage of that and allocate that $2,000 to that window.
The approximate cost for the hydrogen conference, based on the comparative of the Global Petroleum Show, we're probably looking at around $750 for the registration for one person. Now I have to admit, I don't have the exact number yet. I probably should have gone a click deeper on the website so that I have that for you. But I know for the Global Petroleum Show, we were dealing with $750 for the registration, and then roughly $180 a night for the hotel. And then we have that about $70 a day as kind of the, because some meals are included, some aren't. With that conference, I know with the Global Petroleum Show part of it, really none of the meals were really included. So that's kind of what we need to price out. So that $2,000 is probably pretty fair. What we could do is, if we're willing to drop parade candy down to $500, we could do that and maybe move $1,500 over for the hydrogen conference. That should probably be, I would think, give us a fairly good budget amount for it. And then we may have to adjust some of those other numbers. But, the interesting thing is the cost of parade candy. I know $2,000 seems like it's a lot, but when you're actually buying parade candy, what you get for $2,000 isn't that much. I mean, it's enough, certainly, but and that's been going through our traditional candy supplier as well. I know in the past couple of years prior to COVID, we'd actually shifted from the supplier that we classically used. I had gone with a local store that unfortunately is out of business now. But there might be some other ways to source that candy as well. So I mean, of course, the direction always is, as administration, we work within the confines of the budget to provide the best that we can provide. And so if you want to move 1,500 of it over, I think that's a fair recommendation. We do have 5 parades that we need to do candy for on an average year, because we generally have parade here, the Barnett Parade, the Mirthorpe Parade, and then the parade in Fort Assiniboine, the 4 summer parades, and then we have the Christmas parade, which again is one of the items on the other agenda. So, later on, I should say. So, 1,505 is a possibility. I welcome whatever recommendation the committee wants to put forward.
Well, I don't think 5 is enough to cover what we do.
Not all those parades, for sure.
I think it would look pretty bad on us.
So then it raises the question of we need the money to come from somewhere, because not attending isn't an option if we want, if we want to actually take it seriously.
Well, that's why I'm looking for what is the best way forward with this, because, I mean, if we approve the budget as presented, and I know that a number of considerations have been made in that, then the best that we can do as a committee, staying within our budget, would be to recommend to council that they send either a delegate from council specifically, or a delegate from council and maybe from the committee to attend this, because it ties in with so much of the work that we've been doing in hydrogen and carbon capture.
See, the other possibility would be if the committee feels that this is the priority, the committee or board member attending the conference, that could be shifted. We could say, well, instead of EDA, we want to have a committee or board member, or instead of myself attending the EDA, if you feel the other conference is more important, we could maybe do the shift within that part of it and try to absorb the costs there and just prioritize the petroleum show and the hydrogen conference as being the 2 attendance.
Just for, I'm looking at other categories here, the Career and Education Week. Is that?
That's for the Career and Education Expo, that's that.
Oh, Career and
5,000.
Expo?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's the 5,000 that we give on an annual basis.
No, that's 4,000,
to
right?
Northern Gateway as our portion of funding for the Career Expo.
Patricia?
I know, just you had mentioned about choosing basically between them. Again, currently, it doesn't seem like that offers us much of a choice. And I guess that's where I was asking originally about the comparables and with the budget too, is that how do we find it? Because right now, if we're not there front and center, then Greenview is going to be, or whoever else is going to be there competing for these same types of projects that we're competing for. And particularly when it comes to hydrogen, that's one of the things, and Alberta and I had a discussion about it. I was just recently looking into it, and they're talking, one of the big things that they're looking for is changing the regulations around hydrogen to reintroduce airships and use airships as cargo ships. And that's something that is potentially coming down the line. So there's a lot of groundbreaking opportunity with hydrogen that we haven't even heard about yet.
And
I think
an airport that would be perfect for that.
absolutely. And the thing is, they're completely operated robotically because of hydrogen being explosive. Apparently, then they can't be manned. So this is the position that this development that they're looking going forward with that. So not being there, yeah. And then the other thing would be as well is for some of these opportunities with these conferences, exactly like Crystal had mentioned, can we be notified in advance, like maybe there's 2 people that go, maybe we're able to send 7 if they go at their own expense. Is that an option for any members for any of these?
Well, and I mean, that brings up a whole other really good point, which, as you said, Crystal, if you were willing to go as a private attendee, to what extent are we happy in kind of making someone like that a Woodlands ambassador, right? So I mean, you can be there representing your own business, but you can also be there as a Woodlands resident and what can you do to kind of help and support you or anybody who might be attending from our area within that role. So there's certainly some options there on how we can maximize our presence, and again, that's maybe a great future agenda item too on how we can do that with conferences. But in regards to this, yeah, it really does come down to, unfortunately, at this point, it's an either or discussion with the money that we have in front of us.
Peter?
Yeah, I think I would support, going to council. They have a strategic planning budget as well. And I would support going to council and having them send one member along with a committee member. I definitely would support that. I don't know whether we can incorporate that into our motion or not, but.
Well, with council, each councillor gets a budget for going to conferences and stuff,
Yeah.
so. Like, I will go into that, but I will be using the money out of my training budget.
Well, and one of the challenges that we discovered in working here locally was that even though we have a fair number of businesses that are centered here in this region around these issues, their decision makers don't have their offices here, and they defer any of this kind of information to their CEOs and representatives both in Edmonton and Calgary. And we did a quick cross-reference on the Global Energy Conference to local business, and I think we came up with at least 75 businesses that were attending the conference and whose decision makers were not located in the region. So we developed, Bruce and myself and Bert, a short list of companies that we were going to approach their representatives as delegates of the county and reach out to their decision makers that were attending that conference. So we're not just attending the conference, we're actually connecting with those business people and saying, here we are, how can we support the development? We're working with your local people, but we know that some of these decisions are being made in Edmonton and Calgary, appropriately so. So we had a working plan behind the scenes to promote economic development with the county and these decision makers of our local and regional businesses. So ratepayers have to pay taxes in this area, and they need to know that delegates are going on their behalf, not just to attend the conference, but to promote, build relationships, and bring those developments back to the county. And this is one of those conflicts that we noticed in our budget when we cut a bunch of the lines to stay within the framework that council gave us, and I think that that's a part of our job. But also to note that this was one of those areas that it really could have some long-term potential benefits. And the hydrogen game is a 10-year game. It's not going to happen in 1 year, but we need to connect with these opportunities. So I'm back to you, Bert. What do you think is the best? Do we adopt the budget as is and then make that recommendation under the next agenda item, which is work plan updates? Because that's where it appeared in our agenda. Or do we make that recommendation now? What do you feel is the best?
Well, I think that the key thing would be if there's comfort level amongst the committee, that the budget is okay the way it is, we could make that motion to say this is the budget that we recommend to council. As you mentioned, coming up under the work plan updates, we have the hydrogen conference listed. And that could be a motion that comes out of that, is that we recommend that one of our elected officials attend, and if council deems, maybe we send a delegation similar to what we send to the Global Petroleum Show. I think that would be a pretty fair recommendation. That lets us kind of deal with the item at hand here. If everybody's sort of comfortable with where things are, it gives us the opportunity to raise to that council level. The council has an understanding that we feel that we need to have a presence at that hydrogen conference. And then if there is the opportunity for council to squiggle or eke out a little bit more if it's a council priority, that's the best thing we can do as a committee is to raise the things that we think are a priority to the council level for discussion, and so we'll have done that.
So with that in mind, then, I'd like to move forward in that direction, because I don't want a bunch of emails, you know, you took the candy out of the parade. Let's do that then.
Yes.
And let's complete our discussion on the budget and then we can move to the budget.
So,
Okay. Just by going to council, council's in the same position that Bert is in. There's only X amount of dollars.
Of course.
So if we give money to go there, we gotta take it from someplace else. So by doing that, it could come back with a no. There's a good chance, so.
do you think, Mr. Chair, is there a way forward? Do we, you know, we can take that delegate out from the EDA conference and have a committee member attend or move that money over so that we know that we have an attendee from the committee? That's certainly one option that would get us close if we were to take out both the EDA and the Growing the North. Between eliminating both of those, there's probably the room there.
I would sooner go that way. We stay within our budget. We're not going to council for extra money. That's something I think should be in next year's budget, if we need to do that kind of thing.
Okay. We can certainly still make the recommendation to council that we recommend that a council member attend the hydrogen conference as well, but we can certainly do, I mean, if we're going to do it, this would be the time to say that instead of having a committee member attend EDA and the Growing the North, we would put that money towards the hydrogen conference instead.
Just, and I don't know, how about if you just covered the entry? Like if it's $750, perhaps, that's a chunk of change, whereas maybe people would be more willing to carpool and not have their, you know, like, I mean, at least some of it, rather than none of it, and then maybe that's, can we, for a year, because it is in Edmonton. I don't, I'm not getting straight, I'm just thinking, why do we have to pay for the whole shebang? How about just some of it?
Well, in my thinking, so when I heard the announcement, the background that I know and a bit of investigation I did, my understanding with it is, you know, this is now, it's a major initiative from Edmonton Global, which is kind of those 13 municipalities around Edmonton. They all put in $100,000 plus for this big regional entity. And so based on that, I think this is going to be one of their core events going forward, because we know that they have a hydrogen hub strategy and a hydrogen hub committee and all of that. So much like for decades now, Calgary has had the Global Energy Show now renamed, or the Global Petroleum Show now renamed as a Global Energy Show. This is done by the same event organizer, by G&G Events, and I can see this being the staple event for Edmonton going forward for them to promote hydrogen and carbon sequestration and all of that really. Right?
Which is true, but this being that the budget was made, then you became aware of it. For this off year, just make the motion or whatever for the 750 or whatever the entry is, maybe not go to the north, so that's 250 of it, and if someone's willing to pay, at least it's a start, and then have it within a budget line for the following year. So at least then there's a halfway. I don't know. Maybe if we came up with a few bucks and they came up with a few bucks, it's.
Is there an opportunity for online attendance for any of these shows?
So for the Global Petroleum Show, that was, they met with a terrible fate this year with their conference, because literally the Friday before their conference was to begin, we went back into the lockdown and the work from home. And so their conference was completely canceled. About 2 weeks prior, we had made the inquiry, are we going to have an online component? And the flat answer was absolutely not. We're either going to be there in person or we're not going forward with it. And yeah, so that was kind of as we went through those last couple of weeks of September. We were at the point where we were so ready to go. We have wonderful jackets, actually, that Bruce and Art both have, and I mean, we were set and ready. We had a great 3-person presence planned from the county to go and to be at that, and yeah, it just that was one of those golden casualties.
Patricia.
So I think, and kind of to go right back to where Art started with this, basically the bottom line question is, we have $4,000 for the parade, 2,000 for candy, 2,000 for a float. So of that $4,000, what you're saying is that if we're to stay within our budget, then we don't have the opportunity as a committee to promote Woodlands County at any of these events or to learn what potentially could be coming. So from a return on investment perspective, literally, although, again, nobody wants to be the candy killer, but the reality is do we bite a hard bullet, don't participate in the parades at all, take the $4,000, put it into economic development, because what kind of return on investment are we getting other than, obviously, we're here to satisfy our residents, but we're not going to have any money to buy candy if we don't bring business. So I think that's, to me, what the decision ends up having to be. If we're strictly held to this budget, then we take the parade, the float, the candy, and we put that on council. And we say, we're here as economic development, we're going to go forward, participate in these shows to the best of our ability with the delegates that we send, and the parade and like I said, I would put that part back on council.
What you could get is that shifted someplace else and we'll take the $4,000 out of our budget to give to them.
Yeah, and I do understand that, but I just mean sitting at this table specifically for economic development, if we don't have development and we don't have business, we have no revenue. If we don't have candy, we're gonna have some sad children, but there's tons of other wonderful businesses that already operate here that have been doing a great job taking care of those kids.
It's a fair question, and I'll go back to my very first comment. I'm happy to be the tip of the spear of the community, whatever direction you need.
I'm just wondering whether the kids actually understand whether the county threw the candy or not.
Of course they don't.
Their parents do.
So,
Well, you know what?
Give them hand sanitizer.
I think the argument that Patricia just gave is far more relevant. We can actually make parents understand that, kids maybe not.
Well, 2,000 even for the
So,
candy.
yeah, and I'm prepared to keep the float and forgo the candy, and that's the 2,000. I'm back to my original motion, which is to move that $2,000 into the
Okay.
Yeah.
conference, and I think we've come full circle on that. I think it's a fair compromise. I don't want to be the candy killer, but part of our decision-making process within the confines of our budget and grow the north has always been a positive for us, especially with what's going on with the new petroleum
That's a
project
great one.
in Grand Prairie and the EDA. I don't think we should sacrifice those two representatives because of the information that's brought back to the committee. Let's forgo the candy, and if council decides that another group would like to bring the candy part back under a new envelope, then that would be great. But I think we're still staying true to the economic development direction. And quite frankly, we've invested in a fair bit of Energy Futures work and starting to build this relationship. We've had two really good solid platforms to move the county forward on this. And this is just an important part of that piece that could really lead to some long-term development here.
Crystal?
What is the international advertising? There's $1,000 allocated for that.
okay, sorry, you got me back to that, and then I believe I have a friendly amendment for you, Member Bauer. I'm sorry, Crystal?
I just saw it here. It's under
59 and
sponsorships.
133.
It's with the summer boot camps and career and education expo.
Sorry, I got my pages out of order, and that's what we're using them up here. Okay, it's 59. So that was International Economic Development Week. That was, so going back to the comment that Ken made earlier, talking about that business developers winters, and then it turned into this fall, that dining event, the dinner for investment networking. That's basically what that money's for. But the idea was to do that event during the first week of May, which is International Economic Development Week. So it was just the funding for the event during that week.
Oh,
But
okay.
excellent question, and I apologize if that didn't print out in full. But and that did sit in our budget last year at 2,000, and that was another one of those slashes that I had to do where we had to drop it to 1. So, yeah, so that's we have $1,000 there for the Small Business Week events. Now, the Small Business Week Gala has been taken over and is now solely the Whitecourt Chamber event. But we have the ability with that 1,000 to either participate in events during that week of Small Business Week, which is generally the third week of October, or to do our own thing or combination thereof. And then for the International Economic Development Week, that's that first week of May, and we just have the ability there to do some kind of an event or something to recognize that, which in the past has been that Woodlands Developers Realtors kind of event. But what I would suggest this year is, based on council discussion, we can put that 1,000 towards doing some town hall events or something like that.
And I just wanted to add quickly to what Art had mentioned. We could actually even ask if sponsors want to sponsor the candy for the parade float, because there is companies that don't have their own float that would probably be happy to sponsor candy for the floats.
And again, that comes back to that revenue idea, because, yeah, like I said, we can do a whole meeting around that. That sounds wonderful. Friendly amendment. My suggestion would be this. What if we, hold on, let me find my right page. I know what I want to do, I just need to find my right page, so I say properly. Amend parade candy to 1,500. Amend parade float to 1,500. That should give us a net gain of 1,000. And then if we move back to conferences, growing the north, X that off, that would give us another 250. And then EDA conference, we take the committee board member off of EDA and we would move that to hydrogen. And then that would give us a total of 1,750, which should allow us to kind of fund that hydrogen attendee.
Well, I'm not so sure about the EDA and growing the north, whether we
Okay.
should do that.
Okay.
And that would be a question that I would put to the committee. I'm more of the opinion that we should, if we can amend the candy line completely. And then just take that and roll it into the hydrogen conference, and keep the EDA and growing the north, which we have partners, municipal partners that are part of that. And maybe I'll defer to Bruce here a little bit with your experience about how council works with partners from both of those groups.
Revised friendly amendment, 1,500 from candy, 500 from the float, that would give us 2 to 1.
If the committee agrees, but
Well, I feel that we should work within our budget for this year. Next year, if we want to take the parade and candy out, we'd say we're not doing it anymore, that goes to another part of the county. And then we have the money to do what we want next year. But this year, the county's budgets are pretty much done. They just got to bring them to council. So if we go in and start changing things, then that other department has to change their budget. It's not going to be good.
That's where I think we go back to Art's original idea with Nix and the candy. We need to be having more people at these delegations, I would think, rather than like cutting them back I would be very concerned about cutting back any of these delegations that could potentially be bringing work into our area.
Okay, go back to, this is a 10-year project, you said, with hydrogen. So we have 9 more years to do our work with them. This is the first year. Next year, we put more money into that. This year, we work within our budget.
But it puts us in the same situation if we take this budget forward next year, then which budget line are we gonna cut next year?
But we won't have the $4,000 for the parade in the budget then.
What he's saying is that as we
It's
move through the
related.
budget planning, throughout the course of the year, we would ask another department to take on the parade float and the parade candy.
I think the bottom line is return on investment here, in my
Yeah.
mind.
I agree with you, but we still have to work with the rest of the departments. And us just saying, no, we're not doing it, and throwing it to them, it's probably not gonna be good either.
No, what I mean, I thought we had got to the point where we keep the float, we don't do the candy, we ask if anybody wants to sponsor the candy, then we still have the float, we still have candy, and we get to the delegation and everybody wins.
If we amend the parade float line to 1,500, and we amend the parade candy line to 500, that should give us 2,000 that we can use for the hydrogen conference, which should give us enough for at least one attendee. And then, as mentioned, we can either maybe address through sponsorship or, maybe just selectively pick which 1 or 2 parades we want to have candy in rather than doing all 5. Maybe we don't want to do all 5 parades in one. Maybe it's, that's the other part of it, because we always deal with those as they come up. And with having now 2 years off for all of the parades, we don't know what it's going to look like in a post-pandemic kind of a world, right? The one thing that I can say with certainty, and again, it's an agenda item further down, is we know that we do have the ability to do the Wet Court Christmas Parade this year. So, that's the only parade that we know of that is 100% on the books at this point. But that's a this year budget item as well.
Crystal?
Is there a possibility of maybe looking at business partnerships for some of these conferences?
Yes, and again, that kind of going back to what I already mentioned, that's always what you hope to do, is to be able to arrange and meet and kind of, leverage any delegates that you have that are coming from your region as kind of community ambassadors or as ambassadors for the region. I know that's where, as Art mentioned, we had a number of companies that identified petroleum show that we wanted to try to meet with and to speak with. So the answer is yes, and there's lots of ways that we can do that. So again, that is part of probably a future discussion as well.
I mean, kind of financially though, to help offset the costs of attending some of these events.
We haven't done that in the past, but it's certainly something that we could end up considering. You mean kind of do like a joint funding for a delegate or something like that?
Yeah.
It's, at this point, all options are open for the committee, so we can certainly pursue whatever you'd like us to do.
Okay, just, I'm sorry. So Bruce, you have stated that you would go to the global and use your training fund from the council perspective. Okay, so we have one person from here. So we're looking at a second person. So if we give them, like if you're looking at the float and the cannon, we do take some money from there, say, okay, we have X number of dollars for another candidate up to 1,000, and you're gonna still keep the Grow the North and the other one, and you take some from the candy and the float, then we do have that money.
By the time we build in the $180 a day for the hotel room, and then that $80 a day for meals, so you're looking at what?
But if you don't do the whole
plus-
package,
Yeah, but.
you have to?
Well, we don't have to, but that would be my recommendation for
Well,
budgeting
yeah,
purposes. So that's
I
where
get
that
that,
2,000 is probably a pretty fair number, I would think.
Okay, well, at least then we have someone. It's not disturbing to, and there is a possibility. But going forward, then the candy and do the return.
Yeah, we just don't give out candy this year. We give it out.
For
We
Grinches.
save the 500 for the Christmas parade, and we just do that. And, you know,
Yeah. Gotta come to a compromise.
We dedicate that $2,000 to the hydrogen conference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't see that as an inappropriate direction for us as a committee to take. And
Just
our
is what it
budget,
is.
this is our opportunity to stay within our budget guidelines, re-amend the lines. If a sponsor comes forward for more for the parade, great. But we're talking about our budget line now. If a business comes forward and said, we'd like to support you in sending a delegate, or we'd like to buy candy, that's all great. We can look at that later, but now it's our budget. So, if that was your friendly amendment, that we move 500 from the parade and 1,500 from the candy line, then I would make that as a motion to amend the budget to reflect that and dedicate that money to the hydrogen conference. And allow the chair to take it from there.
Okay. You're making that motion?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Any discussion on that motion? Okay, call the vote.
Perfect.
Excellent, and the committee is always right, and I admire and appreciate all of the input. Thank you, everyone. Okay, so that gives us an amended budget, so then that brings us back to the original motion, which is in the RFE, which is somewhere here in my stack of papers, my goodness. There we go, I think we found it here. So the original motion, or the original recommendation rather, that the ECDEV committee discuss and provide feedback on the budget, and then recommend it to Woodlands Council for approval. So, as amended, we have a budget to recommend to council for approval, would be the next question.
Yes. You would like to make that motion? Art?
I'll move the budget presented as amended.
Call the question.
Favor.
All in favor?
Excellent, thank you. Okay, we can put that one to bed. And looking at our time, we're about 2.5 hours in. Mr. Chair, would you like to take a short break, or is everybody happy? We still have a number of agenda items in front of us, and we could wait if you want to take the break when we go to the in-committee, whatever council or whatever the committee would like to do for that.
We can take a 5-minute break.
Stretch the legs.
Did I hear 5-minute break?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
So the next item is,
Okay, just, I'll get you to hold for 1 second. We are again live, thank you.
item 6.3, Woodlands County Agricultural Profile Recommendation from the Subcommittee.
Okay, well, so on this item, there's a fair bit of background that's involved. This is an item that we started to embark on a bit earlier this year as an economic development committee. And the direction from the committee was to form a ag profile subcommittee. And then with that subcommittee, take a look at what are some of the possible options. So the subcommittee as it existed was our FDF chair, Dale Klein, as well as, oh my goodness.
Linda?
Thank you, Linda, and
Reinhardt.
thank you, oh my gosh, Linda, I'm so sorry. Linda Renford, who was formerly on our committee and is now on the agricultural committee. They were our two appointees to the subcommittee. So the subcommittee technically does still exist, but we don't have any appointees from the council. The role of the subcommittee was to look at several possible options, and they did come up with a recommended option, which was to go forward with developing an agricultural profile using a specific local provider. And the provider that we had pointed to was Carol Webster, who is with the Grizzly Gazette from Swan Hills. Carol has done some work in the past on the history guide for Wild Alberta, as well as she did the Wild Tourism Guide. And so based on her expertise and on the pricing and the modeling and everything we could get, that was the recommendation. And so what we have in front of you is information on, this was the presentation that she had presented to the subcommittee, which kind of goes through some of the possibilities of what the pages and everything within our ag profile may look like. But the idea is, and actually has been passed at the Ag Service Board as well, that we go forward basically with this provider to do an agricultural profile. And where this would fit, just to give everybody a frame of reference, the idea behind the project is to be able to have the project basically fund itself through advertising. Should there be an advertising component or a component of it that we would have to cover through the county, that can be absorbed through the existing advertising allocations that are within the Agricultural Service Board and the Economic Development Budget. So there's two recommendations. One is that the county accepts the ag profile sample as information, and the second would be that the county committee go forward with the project as recommended by the subcommittee. And then if we wish the subcommittee to continue, we could appoint new folks to the subcommittee. And as was mentioned earlier in the meeting, Councillor Dean has said that should the subcommittee continue to exist, he would love to be one of the appointees.
Any questions?
Oh, no, I was just gonna do the motion for the info.
Well, I'm just wondering, on the recommendation, it says $8,700 and the cost will be offset by paid advertising in the booklet. Who is doing that?
So that would be part of what Carol Webster would do through the Grizzly Gazette. So the idea is that we would be able to provide some of the editorial content. So there might be some specific stories, or on behalf of the Ag Service Board, specifically, our farm family of the year. Maybe there's some other specific things that they would like to profile. We would create through the advertising in the magazine, or within the profile, if there were any specific sites that any of our realtors or any of our local folks wanted to advertise any specific opportunities. That would all be private advertising that would go in, that would basically be part and parcel of this. But yeah, that's basically the idea, is that Carol would be the coordinator and the publisher. We would work with her to develop kind of a names list of the potential advertisers or the folks that we wanted stories done on. And then she would do all of the groundwork and, the revenue, and everything, all of the associated costs, all would go through the Grizzly Gazette. Basically, we just contract her and she does the project.
Okay, so there's no outlay of cash from economic
The
development?
only outlay that we would have directly, the way that things are as recommended would be if we want to do any specific advertising ourselves within the magazine. But even with that and the conversations that Dom and I have had with Carol, she's pretty flexible, right? So I mean, basically, the project would fund itself based on however much advertising revenue she can raise. So if we get enough for 12 pages, great. Ideally, it would be 16 to 24. But it just sort of depends where she's at on the advertising part of it, right?
And the next one, 1,700 to 2,000, half of it being paid by, no, it's the next, the printing of 250 hard copies. It's under recommendation.
Page 61.
Sorry, my
That's,
apologies.
that's supposed to be split between Ag Service Board and Economic Development.
Do we have that in the budget?
Sorry, just give me 1 second. I've managed to somehow really lose my place in my.
It's on the back of the blue page with Woodlands County written on it. Next one.
There we go. Okay, my apologies, I lost my spot there. So the overall cost, estimated production cost, would be about $8,700, and then for that printing would be another 17 to 2,000 if we printed 250 hard copies. So of that, that would have to come out of our existing advertising budget, out of the allocation that we would just put in. So, I mean, that kind of, we would eat half of that, so, 1,000 of that would be for the Economic Development Committee, and then that would come out of the advertising that we've kind of just okayed. Right?
So it is in the budget then?
Yes, yeah. Yeah, we would have enough budgeted dollars to be able to do this project as recommended. And the number of printed copies is a number that we can adjust as well, frankly. We were talking ballpark that 250 is probably right. We know that, and as was mentioned, not everybody has access to the internet, and so while there's absolutely going to be an electronic component to this, having a number of hard copies is probably essential. We can determine how many of them we need, and we may even be able to just print some in-house as well. So, but the initial thought was if we print about 250 hard copies, and then we're thinking that this would probably be a biannual kind of a project, where it's probably something we would want to revisit every couple of years and kind of cycle the stories and some of the items back.
What's the distribution plan for the 250 copies?
We haven't gotten to that point that we've really put it together yet. I mean, I think probably what we had envisioned would be copies available at the Ford office and at this office. We hadn't really planned a mail out or that sort of thing, but certainly any of the events that we're at, we would have them available there as well. And then our more and more our standing and consistent presence is through the county website.
What concerns me is we see so many of these things done and they sit on a shelf and nobody looks at them. Nobody picks them up. And it's money wasted. So I think to go ahead with this, we'd have to have a target who you're gonna go after, And not just to sit in the offices, it's for somebody to pick them up, because that, to me, is just a waste of money and paper.
Well, and so part of the rationale behind this is kind of going back to that earlier acronym of FATE, right? So through forestry, we know that we've got our forestry companies kind of doing and managing and doing their thing. We have an overall investment profile that we've developed through the growth REIT, and it's available, that's on the county website. We know that we have, it needs a bit of an update, but for the A and C site, there is kind of that prospectus and that guide for investment around their site. Around tourism, we're developing new elements and new things through Wild Alberta and trying to do that. On the energy side, we've got the petroleum show, and we've got the hydrogen conference and all of that, and we're trying to make connections and to do things. Agriculture was really the part of it where we didn't have something where we pulled all of those resources together. So much like the investment profile that is on our website, that's really the role that I see this document plays from the economic development side, right? Certainly from the agricultural side, there's maybe a bit more to it because it's very much a celebration, and what we're doing now is a celebration of some of the history. On the Ag Service Board side, there's always programs and things that they want to consistently promote. And so I think that, through that part of it, it really makes sense that we did the recommendation to have the subcommittee and that connection between our group and the Ag Service Board, so that we're not just siloed. The idea is it is an economic development document, but it isn't just an economic development document. It's something that the life to it, I think, is going to come out of how we celebrate and recognize and promote the opportunities we have within our ag sector, which, if you go back to that FATE acronym, the A is really that area where we've got a bit of a vacuum, and this would help to fill that.
Speaking for myself, I think the $8,700 one is a good idea. This one, we're trying to find money to send people to the hydrogen show, and we don't even know if this is gonna take off this $1,000, whether they're documented, these copies are just gonna sit on a shelf and nobody look at them.
Well, we can certainly dispense with the hard copy part of it, or that's the part that we can kind of renegotiate and talk with Carol. I mean, certainly once we have the electronic file, we know that we can print copies internally, right? So, I mean, I agree with you. I think from our purpose, electronic is probably what's preferred within the economic development world, but I think that there is a definite need that kind of recognized through the ASB to say that some printed copies of this, to be available at least through the Fort and the county offices would be a value as well. But I mean, we can adjust.
Peter?
Well, I think one of the things is that one of the reasons is the numbers 250. That's not a lot of copies. The second thing is that I think this is one of the things that the Ag Service Board is going to probably have to wrestle with a little bit too. Is where do we promote those things within the spectrum that the Service Board operates? And I think that's one of the things that's going to be a little bit more, is going to be discussed a little bit more down the road, because one of the things that I had mentioned at the Service Board level was that I had attended a show in Portland, Oregon a number of years ago where the municipality there actually was at that trade show and brought a lot of that information to that trade show, and that was in printed documents for people that were there. And it was really interesting. It wasn't just stuff that the municipality had done, but it was also all of the little businesses that were involved in that municipality. And I asked them at the time when I was there, I said, how is that, how do you guys do this? And he said, it's just, they give us the information, and then we have people at the booth, and we promote whatever's happening in the municipality. And actually, that's where most of their printed documentation was leaving. So it's not specifically that we put it somewhere, it's now how do we market it? So that's just my perspective.
Patricia?
Just a couple of questions on that. I think that as the advertisers, they're selling advertising, the advertisers are going to have the question of where is this going to be distributed? So I think that that would be an important question to come back to. The other part of that as well is with the ordering of how many copies, I think that very well might be dependent on the number of advertisers. So I would like to see it come back when they have, got the print version or the digital version to a finished position where they can say, okay, so we have 16 pages, we have 24, we have 30, we have 6, whatever it is, and then be able to make a decision on the printed version at that point, once you know what it contains. And like Peter had mentioned, I think the printed version would be really important for the trade show booth to be able to pass that out. In looking at it, I really like what she's presented here in that I think it'd be great for the Facebook page, for example, something to get out to residents, because again, as a resident, I want to know which farms I can go to in order to look after a supply for my family. So I would see personal value in that as well. But I think we should wait on the hard copies.
Well, and I think there's room there as well. I mean, if we end up with, we're probably ideally looking at somewhere between that 18 to 24 pages, right? That's the kind of thing that, if we have a specific event where we know we need to print 30 or 40 or 50 copies internally, we could certainly do that, right? And so for the Open Farm Days, for example, it would certainly make sense that, let's print some copies off and take them to our booth at Open Farm Days, right? I think for publication needs and for advertising needs to create the buy-in, I think Carol needs to have kind of a set number of print copies. And so certainly like the distribution plan, I mean, ideally our market is Woodlands County internally, right? So I think that's, if we have to say to somebody, what's the distribution plan? Well, we want to get it in the hands of every Woodlands resident we can. We know most of that is going to be electronic, but we do have a couple of hundred print copies that are going to be professionally printed and done. And then we have the opportunity to kind of print and do more in-house. But I think that in order to attract the investment from the advertisers, she needs to be able to present a base number of printed copies.
So there is some background on this that I think is important for the committee to acknowledge. Is the subcommittee was formed as a way of acknowledging the fact that agricultural development is economic development. And that within our county, we needed to bring the regions of our county together through this subcommittee to acknowledge agriculture in an economic development perspective. And the document that you've seen in front of you is, I really like this document. And it acknowledges, I'm going to use the regions, Fort Assiniboine and Whitecourt and Whitecourt West, parts of this county, to raise the awareness of the importance of Fort Assiniboine and agriculture within our county to our residents in the Whitecourt area that may not be as familiar to that, and vice versa, to get an acknowledgement of agricultural development as economic development. And my sister works with an 80 cow-calf pair on the very western part of the county, and my family farms grain farming for 80 years in Thorhild in the Westlock area. So I know that Barhead, I know Fort Assiniboine, not very well, but I know its agricultural importance to this region. So the subcommittee was created to address that lack of information within the county and external to the county, and this recommendation has come forward from them with some really good work. The document as presented, I think, spoke specifically to what we asked the subcommittee to do, and they've done some great work on it. We do have the flexibility of printing more of those documents and taking them to other events and activities as we see fit. But I'm strongly supporting this because I think it was one of the areas when I started 2 years ago, and Councillor Dale had addressed this is building relationships within the county and bringing Forest and Warren and Whitecourt closer together. And I think this is one of our better examples of how we've done that, supporting the work of council in the same process. So I was thrilled to see this in the package, Bert, and I think the subcommittee has really brought something great forward to us on that.
I think it's a great idea. I just don't want to see us spend $1,000 and these copies sit and don't get distributed and nobody
agree
picks them
with
up. You know, with our community letter that we used to send out. You go in the stores and they're sitting there, they're this deep, and nobody picks them up. And it's just a waste.
Yeah, and I agree. We have to challenge ourselves to, when we print these copies, to get them out to partners, to get them out in the community and have them not sit on the shelf. Completely agree with that.
Patricia?
Also, just thinking of the Woodlands Express, like, that's something that once this document's printed even, maybe there can literally be an advertisement for this document in the Woodlands Express, that people can reach out for that, because, say, for example, if somebody has a farm business, maybe they want to hand this out themselves. Maybe they want 100 copies for their own business.
Yeah, no, I think that the committee is spot on, and number of printed copies, yes, is something that is probably an elastic number as we move forward. I guess the question at this point would be, are we comfortable with defining a number of printed copies at this time, or is it better to not define a number of printed copies?
Well, personally, I don't think it serves a purpose not to have some printed copies. That's just my personal opinion, because I know that is the mechanism where you're going to get people to buy in. And secondly, I think then it becomes a responsibility of us to figure out how we get them out, not just to, like Bruce says, like to leave them sit. So I'm not opposed to at all to the way that this recommendation is written.
Crystal?
Yeah, I just am wondering again if there's a way of capturing what this does for economic development in the county. So when we look at all of our different advertising costs, is there a specific way that we can follow this out the door and see what it's bringing back to the community?
And it's an excellent question, and then there's a number of ways that we can evaluate the project. I think the first evaluation on the front end is going to be, what's the level of buy-in, right? I mean, is this something that our local producers are going to say, hey, this is great, or why is Carol calling me? So I think that, we always have to have that end vision in mind as to what is the value that we want to get from it. I'll go back to my earlier comment. Why I like this proposal is because right now, if we look at our core pillar industries, we've got a bit of a gap on how do we promote and address and attract young agriculture. And so this, I think, is a really good solution that brings us and the Ag Service Board together to the table. How we evaluate it is a great question, and there's a number of ways that we can do that. If there's something that we want to build in on the front end as a specific way to do that, I welcome whatever the committee would want to put forward.
Like when we come back to the second recommendation, which is should the subcommittee continue on? That's one of those things that I think would fall under an answer to that question, is together with the Ag Service Board, what are they hearing from their producers? And what are we getting back? What are they seeing? Are they seeing an increase in customers? Are they seeing an increase in people wanting to invest? Are they seeing new opportunities become available as a direct result of this?
Well, one of the things that I can comment on that is that even though we stepped out of that business, is it still, like, I still deal, for example, in sides of pork, You know, I go through probably 50, 60 a year that I source for people, and I don't even cut them up. And that's after the business is shut down for 3 or 4 years. So the Ag Service Board has a lot of work to do in starting to figure out exactly how are we going to portray agriculture? Are we going to portray it in the traditional way? Or are we going to start looking at our market gardens, and are we going to start looking at these farms like Blue Ridge Farms that have done this for a while? Are we going to start looking at them as being an essential part of agriculture more than the grain farmer that has 21,000 acres? So, you know, this is just the beginning of something that I think is really, really big. And so I don't think we should, I think we need to have the subcommittee continue, and I think we need to start having those conversations.
Patricia?
Is the advertising affordable? How much, for example, are some of these ads? So if this is who we're trying to promote, trying to help, are these farmers and so on, agricultural producers, yeah, is it affordable? And what are they getting for their investment?
Excellent question, and I thought I had her ad rates included. My apologies if I didn't. I have a specific answer to that question.
Okay.
I can give you the exact rates if you give me about 10 or 15 minutes after the meeting. I can find an email because I know we've got them. The key word I can say is affordable. One of the key reasons in going with Carol is because we're not in an invest in Alberta kind of environment. Nowhere even close. I think we're looking at like, $25 ads. I think we're at the beginning part of it, just kind of a name listing and that sort of thing. And then going up to, I think the most expensive is about $250.
Okay,
So
perfect.
I mean, that was one of the real exciting things of working with her is, I mean, it's realistic based on the economics that we know that people are facing.
Awesome.
Just to bring us back to our initial conversation of this meeting, when we were talking about business plans and access of knowledge, so there's more of a transparent process. Could something be put in I know it's promoting agriculture, but that business, since it's from an economic perspective, how to find some of that information as an ad in here too? Trying to link the both?
My hope is that, provincial ag and forestry might be one of those key folks we're able to approach for them to put some resources and some links of that kind of thing into it, right?
Well, and for Woodlands to have.
Oh, yes. So again, this is the really nice thing about going with Carol, full editorial control.
Okay.
So we've got basically carte blanche to design this thing to serve whatever needs we want it to serve.
Because that may answer your question that, we can, ask them when you're applying, where did you get, how did you know to come here? Well, we saw this in this, or this was useless. That's some kind of feedback for us.
And I love your idea, what you mentioned there, but maybe that's a great way to open the document is the first opening pages are an editorial about the new business of agriculture, or the new old business of agriculture, something like that, and just include some statistics about how we're transitioning kind of back to some of the family farms, how we're getting food to table, these kinds of things. So that might be a good opening for that document.
I think that as part of it, it just makes absolute sense to have an opening from the mayor, as well as probably comments from the economic development chair and from the agricultural service board chair, who happens to be in the room as well.
Oh, beautiful.
I would be in favor of, after we do this, after a year, our subcommittee talk to the advertisers to see if their business did increase or what changes. That way we have something to go with. If after a year and the advertisers come back and say, no, nothing's changed, then this isn't working.
Yeah, you need
right.
data.
That's
You need some kind of
absolutely right.
data.
100%.
And just a quick point, that documents like this become searchable. And that is with technology, an important part of one of the spin-offs from this. It goes into the searchable database, so agricultural development, Woodlands County, up comes this document as one of the support documents. And even getting it out in that context means that there's going to be multiple years where it's going to have a life online.
Peter?
Well, and to support that is, you know, I remember when we started our advertising, we were convinced that by certain people to do it in the traditional way, and there was really no way to measure that. One of the things that happened once we started to get into the social media thing, we couldn't keep up, and it didn't cost us near as much. So, you know, this is I think a stepping off spot. Like once we have this started, then we can start to build on it.
Okay. Anybody like to make a motion?
Yeah, I'll make the motion that we accept the agricultural profile sample as information, and I believe we need a second motion as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, so we'll do the first
Okay.
one. Any discussion on that? Okay, call the question. All in favor? Now we need the second motion.
I'll second that motion.
Okay. Any questions on that?
Sorry, I heard the voice from this side of the room, but.
Oh, sorry, me.
I'm sorry, I didn't recognize whether it was Patricia.
Patricia, yeah.
Okay, perfect, thank you very much. Sorry
It would
about
be
that.
good if you're making the motion to actually read it.
Oh,
So that way
okay,
we can catch it.
perfect.
Any questions, discussion? Call the question. All in favor?
And then the third possible item would be, do we want to reappoint two folks to that subcommittee?
Any discussion on that?
Oh, you're in the agriculture,
Yeah.
and then Alan's from economic. Do you want member at large also?
Well, I know with the initial structure we had, what we did was we basically had two from the Ag Service Board and two from our committee.
Okay.
So ideally, two appointees to that subcommittee from our committee is great, and whoever you want it to be would be fine.
I think Greg Thompson sat on that committee, no?
Yes, yeah, so from, my understanding now is from the ASB point of view, I believe you've got Greg Thompson and you've got Linda on as, I think, the reps from the ag side.
Okay.
So basically, Linda's kind of moved from our group to be a rep on the subcommittee, but from the ASB.
And this is the committee that Alan was volunteering for?
Yes.
Could you sit on that committee?
I could sit on that committee as well. I have no problem because I sit as chair of the service board unless you would like to, Crystal. Like it, you know, or was it two counselors?
No, we're wide open. Yeah, so it could be.
Because I really would like to see some youth and some young ideas at the table because it's their future we're going to try to shape here. I mean, I'm definitely still going to be involved as on the service board, so.
And so at this point, sort of the envisioned role of that subcommittee is just to kind of steer and make sure that this project as approved goes forward. But it may evolve over the course of time as well, and it may come back, Crystal, to what you said, to, you know, what are the indicators, what are the ROIs that we want to follow specifically with this project? Great opportunity to be involved with that part of it.
Would you like to sit on it, Crystal?
I would be willing to sit on that one, yeah.
And we know Alan wants to be on it.
I think we have our two representatives.
Yeah.
And plus that allows you to still sit on the
Yeah.
ASB and
Yeah, because we're going to be
governance on that as well.
Yeah.
Because I would think as the chair, you're probably ex officio on that. I mean, it's, you know, but Certainly.
Okay, can we get a motion to,
So that would be, just to clarify the motion, we need to appoint Alan Dean and Crystal Wood as members of the subcommittee for the Ag project.
Oh, go
she
ahead.
beat you.
I'll make that motion to accept the 2 members on this board.
Subcommittee.
Subcommittee, correct. Members become part of the subcommittee for.
You got that, Bert?
Yeah, thank you, Beth. So that we would appoint Alan Dean and Crystal Wood as our subcommittee members for the
Okay,
Ag
good.
project.
Any discussion? Call the question. All in favor?
Very good, so that's passed. So Leslie, that brings up, if you remember previous economic development meetings, we've had the motion war on between one side of the room to the other. So it's kind of our version of the wave. It's like, it's like
Yeah, it was a game.
revisiting some history there.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay, thank you. So we've got that part of things covered off, and now I'm gonna try to do this without losing my spot in my meeting package. My apologies for all the fumbling in a little bit earlier. That brings us to the work plan update. And so, diving into these, and of course, always looking for committee feedback and, ways of preference and all of that. What we moved into, just for kind of ease of detail, is verbal reports on each of these items, sometimes with the link. But should there be anything specific that you want to see more detail on, or if you ever want to see a written report, again, I'm the tip of the spear, pointing in whatever direction you feel I need to be, okay? I did attend the EDAC 2021 conference, so it was a virtual conference this year. And going back to an item that we mentioned about COVID-proofing events, it was quite interesting that they stated that for the EDAC conferences going forward, they will offer both an in-person and an online component. So that's the first national conference that I've seen that I've been at, where they've said that going forward, their mandate is to make sure they've got things kind of COVID-proof. So I thought that was an interesting benchmark. There was some good information there. I think probably for me it was in advance of the both the federal election and this election. There was an opportunity. Aaron O'Toole actually gave a presentation, which was followed by a Q&A. And I did have a chance to ask a question directly to him regarding pipelines and pipeline corridors. And he stated that, basically the position of the Conservative Party was that a pipeline corridor didn't really make sense because not every project would be able to go through a specific corridor, but they did like the idea of, having maybe several sort of areas or that kind of thing designated. So that was one of the questions that came from that. Some other good background information, some other benchmarking on sort of, federal trends and all of that, but really, I think the main part of it is just that everybody's had enough of COVID, and, we've seen everybody try to just do what we can to get beyond and get back to defining what I hate to use the term new normal, but that's really a big part of it, right? I mean, now we're going to hopefully start to see the discussion around how do we recover, what does a smart recovery look like, how do some of those things work. The big thing I think that came out of it is the importance now at the corporate level for the incorporation of SEG. That's the societal, environmental, and governance, right? And especially at the national perspective, the idea was integration, diversification of the workforce, integration of folks from all backgrounds, all walks of life, creating that kind of multicolored, multifaceted kind of value within your team. That really is the marching orders that a lot of companies are moving forward. And so there's, it created some interesting discussion and some interesting things, but those are probably some of the highlights. All of the presentations from that are available online, and so it was a very different conference this year, because usually with these things, you have a little bit of leeway on how you can, coordinate with other attendees and all of that. And it was kind of limited. There was a Q&A and a little sideboard that you could send some text messages on, but they didn't really do a lot of other networking, which I thought was a bit different. But for anybody who is interested in kind of seeing what was presented and all of that, I'm quite happy that we could sit down and do a Teams meeting, or we can kind of run through some of those things, and I can play those presentations that are available online for another couple months if you want to look back into them. So that was the deck. With the Career Expo, so again, another one of those events that has been reimagined several times this year. So ideally, we have the event at the end of October, and that had been the plan until the fourth wave hit. And then we said, okay, we'll move it from being online and in person because the school kids, which are the main audience, basically just can't be there, right? So we said, well, how do we move it to be online? So then we had a November date selected, but we ran into some technical issues and some different things, and so we moved it to February. So we actually have an online Career Expo, which is supposed to be this year's Career Expo, planned to be February 22nd, I believe was the date, and it'll be confirmed in a future calendar for sure. So with that, we're going to try to move it online. Where it affects our budget is out of that this year. We normally put $4,000 per year towards the event. This year, our contribution in the town is doing an equal amount of $2,500, which would allow us to purchase the event platform. So we have to do a one-year event license, which was about $6,000. So between the two municipalities putting in the $2,500, that covers the bulk of it. The rest can come out of other funds that we already have within that Career Expo budget. And then that will allow us to do the event in February, which will be virtual. And then we are still planning, and we have the budget allocation for $4,000, which is a normal allocation towards an in-person fall event for next year. So that's kind of the Career Expo update. The summer boot camps, we got a very gracious and wonderful letter showing the appreciation of the county support once again for the boot camps. They always go the first week of July. They're held through Northern Gateway, but we know that students from around the region are able to attend, and I believe this was either year 4 or year 5 for them, I think. But we had more attendees than ever before, and some of them were in person, some of them were virtual. And the plan is to do the boot camps again next year, but there was great appreciation from Northern Gateway on that. And this year, we've actually mentioned a little bit about the entrepreneur course and some of the other things that are there. Again, I can go into more detail or find more detail, but as an overview. Growth Rita and Wild Alberta. I'll give a little bit of background explanation because it's kind of the only way I can think of to do this. So the Growth Rita has existed for a number of years now. I'm going to say a decade plus. And the Rita itself is its own individual nonprofit entity, right? So it's actually, the full title is the Grizzly Alliance for Regional Economic Development. But we affectionately call it Growth. Under Growth, we have tourism at the regional level is one of the key functions. And so the Wild Alberta tourism brand has been developed, and the Wild Alberta website has been developed as being part of that. The current path we're on with the Rita is to try to spin the tourism aspect off to be its own independent society. And so by doing that, then we would have its own separate group. Right now, all of the funds for Wild come out of the growth funds. So we pay an annual membership of about $7,600 for the municipality to growth. We've got 7 other municipalities that are also participating in the Rita as well at this point. There's been a lot of rationale and a lot of reasoning, including a strategic planning study going back a few years ago, but that's really the intent, is to spin Wild Alberta off. So this is going to, over time, evolve into two reports, basically. So on the Growth RETA side, Growth generally meets monthly. It's usually the third Thursday. We have Peter, Councillor Gilkin is our official delegate to the Growth RETA, appointed by council. And we haven't had our first growth meeting yet. I know I've reached out to Mayor Jabush a couple of times because she's the current chair for the RETA, to reach out and to talk to you and to say welcome aboard and give you some background and some briefing. Where we're in a bit of a vacuum at the moment is it has been a very tough year for the RETA. As was mentioned earlier, the province reduced the RETA funding from $90,000 a year to $50,000 a year. And so with that, our 10-year executive director that had been with the RETA, he ended up moving on. The position was vacant for a couple of months. They did hire a lady who came in and who did some work, but there was more involvement than what she had thought with the role, and then she had some other priorities. And so now she's moved on, and so now they're currently doing a bit of a candidate search and trying to reach back to figure out what we can do for admin. So without an admin in place, it's been a very slow and difficult year. We did a strategic planning session for growth a little bit earlier this year, which went incredibly well. There's a lot of momentum that's there, that's around the table, and a lot of ideas, including spinning Wild off as its own entity. But yeah, there's more to come on the RETA file. It's been fairly quiet for the last little bit. On the Wild Alberta side, earlier this year, the ECDEV committee appointed me as the sole EDO to kind of serve on this. We have a steering committee that's been appointed to spin Wild Alberta off. And so in regards to that, we've been meeting on kind of a bi-weekly basis, and we're currently exploring how to approach municipalities to do a municipal ask. We know it's difficult, and that's certainly been shared around the table. But the idea is that at least to have information come forward to councils probably early in the new year, in the first quarter or so, as to what Wild Alberta might look like, why we would need municipal support for it, and all of that. We're going through kind of that initial budgeting and going through what are some of the other funding sources, because there are some both provincial and federal tourism grants that are open currently, which in the past, the RETA has made really good use of grant funding to supplement their operating budgets and all of that. Yeah, so we're in the process of working some things through on Wild and all of that as well. And again, I can give more detail if anybody needs. For the Business Support Network and for the updates there, we have the BSN website, which is generally the best place to go to look for all of the BSN updates and dates and all of that. We do have the 4 BSNs that are within our region. There's the Whitecourt BSN, we have a Mayerthorpe BSN, a Barhead BSN, and the Fox Creek BSN. And so generally the Whitecourt BSN, we have a monthly meeting, so we always have a planning session. And then from that, we're usually planning 2 to 3 months ahead as to what to do at the BSN event itself, which is usually a luncheon event. And then for the other BSNs, Mayerthorpe is usually an actual meeting several times a year. And we actually did the virtual BSN Mayerthorpe one for this month. We actually did around the mandatory vaccinations. And what businesses can do and when they need to consider it and all of that. So we actually had a lawyer come in to do a presentation and to kind of answer some of those questions. And we did that one actually as a regional BSN because we realized that content was something that was going to be of interest to all 4 regions. So that's been one of the neat things with the BSN network is that as we identify subjects, because each community kind of picks its own topic, but through the pandemic, if we've had one topic that seems to be common amongst all 4 communities, then we'll say, well, let's do it as a regional BSN, and then we put it out through all 4 networks, see if folks want to join it. And so that brings me to the Whitecourt BSN. which barks up a tree that is near and dear to us, and that's rural training. And so, being on the steering committee, what we've kind of recognized is that there's been a number of factors and some other background kind of fits in. But the idea is that the Whitecourt BSN is going to facilitate 2 sessions, one on November 25th, one on December 15th, where we're inviting local businesses to come in and tell us about what are your training needs. What are the training programs that you wish you had locally? And from that, as we're able to kind of create a bit of an inventory for it, then we're hoping to be able to go and to reach out to some of our post-secondary groups. And Argue mentioned Surge a bit earlier. I think that there's an opportunity to maybe, once we have identified, because I mean, this is stuff that we've identified and done in the past as well, but we're wondering post-pandemic if the answers now are the same as the answers we had 2 years ago. And so that's kind of the idea. So it really is, it's kind of a 5-way consultation between Whitecourt, Woodlands, Community Futures, the Chamber, all done under the Whitecourt BSN banner, where we're reaching out to businesses and asking them to attend either one of these 2 virtual sessions so that we can get some development. And then from that, we're hoping to be able to have a future BSN meeting where we would end up being able to have some of those educational institutions in to kind of address how we might be able to do this and to do some of that. So that's the specific project related to the Whitecourt BSN. Moving on to the Christmas parade, the Chamber, as we mentioned, is going forward with their Christmas parade. It's on December 4th. Classically, we've put in a grader with a trailer that's been decorated. We have that opportunity to do that again this year. So I haven't pulled the trigger yet on our parade entry, but I wanted to make sure that if the committee's on board and we're good with that, then we'll put in a grader with a trailer. And in the past years, we've approached our friends from the Journey to Bethlehem group from Fort Assiniboine to either provide costumes or provide folks to come and sit on the float in costume, and we have a nice Christmas theme and everything that we can then tie into. So that would be my recommendation on how we proceed on that again this year, unless there's something different that you guys would like to see us do. Okay, perfect. Silence and crickets on that is great. That gives me the answer. I can tell infrastructure this afternoon to start putting the grader together. That's wonderful news. Okay, so it's that one done. Next is the Invest in Alberta ad, and I wanted to include this because, as I mentioned, this is one of those items that I struck from the budget this year. In the past, what we've done is we've actually done kind of the 2-page spread, right? Going back in past years, we've actually done a double-page spread with Whitecourt and Woodlands together and joint content and all of that. Unfortunately, it's just not the economic reality that we're in now. We did do the 1/6 page ad last year, which was, about $1,900. And it's a fantastic magazine, Economic Developers of Alberta, which is, it's their official magazine. It's near and dear to our heart. It's all of those things, but the price point is just not there for us this year. So I wanted to include that as information, and also as part of the rationale why unfortunately, we just can't afford to do it this year. And then we've already talked a little bit about the Global Energy Show. Art and Bruce, did you have anything to add about that? I mean, we've pretty much kind of covered it, right?
Yeah, we were able to carry forward our fees to the next conference. And we've done a lot of background work. We had 2 individual 2-hour meetings and support documents and business information that Bert supplied to us. So we've done a lot of background, and we want to just lever that forward for next year. So we can build those communications, and now we've got the support on the Canadian Hydrogen Conference. So I think those are 2 real good initiatives, very in tune with what we've done as a committee over the last couple of years.
Getting back to that, before we used to share booths with the town, And we found the people that were stopping in to talk to us at the booth were not the people we were targeting. They were just, like you'd sit there for 2 hours and talk to one person that had nothing to do with what we were looking at. So we said, no, we're not gonna do a booth anymore. We're gonna go out and we're gonna act like salesmen. And talk to the right people. Because the booth was fairly expensive.
Oh, yeah.
And the way the Global Petroleum Show was going, it was getting downsized so much. Like before the whole parking lot was all booths and companies with, showing the equipment and everything. There isn't any more of that. And it's sad to see, but that's the way it is. So the way we were doing it was, to me, was a lot better way.
Yeah, we had, as I mentioned earlier, we actually planned a meeting strategy amongst us and with those key business and industry people in addition to the conference. So we would have a morning meeting, we had a strategy, we would touch base with a number of industry people, we split it between the three of us. Then we would have an evening meeting and recap gains and potential things for us to consider, and do that for every day of the conference, and then bring a report back to the committee. So it was really much. It was a working week for the three of us to promote Woodlands County. So I hope that's our plan as we move forward, and the conference becomes a reality for next fall.
So Ard mentioned an important point that I forgot to mention. So with the cancellation of the conference this year, what they did is they wouldn't do a rebate, but they did basically, we've got on credit, hopefully what should be enough to register a couple of our delegates next year. They told us that, we're not gonna do any refunds. We've got everything there on account, so we've got about $2,000 roughly on account, which should hopefully cover 3 registrations for us next year. We'll wait and see, because they did tell us that the registration fees are going to go up considerably. So we'll deal with that as to what it is, but there's already 2,000 there that's indicated. So.
Which is good.
And then that brings us to the hydrogen conference, which I think we've we covered that a fair bit, and thank you for being so aware. So unless there's more detail or more information that's needed, that would be my work plan.
Anybody? Any questions?
I have a quick question about the growth rate of wild Alberta. That's something I'll, want to learn more about as time goes on and have a side conversation, I'm sure. So, but I'm just curious if with tourism, with some of the partners, like I know here, like Trailblazers and that organization is just a real asset to our area. And I'm just wondering, is there any mechanism currently to bring on the tourism side, some of the campground developers, maybe the snowmobile club, the ATV club, to bring these guys together in a brainstorming session? Just wondering like what they can pool on to make them all stronger going forward. Because I'm looking at areas like the Bighorn area, west of Rocky Mountain House and so on. And it's such a huge community. And we are primely positioned with outfitting, ATVs and so on, to really kind of bring people into the area and capitalize on that.
So I'm going to unpack that into 2 items, because I think they're both great. Yes, so we are part of the Golden Triangle. So to describe that, I'll try to do the quick little 2-minute version. So we have a 6-way municipal partnership with 3 snowmobile clubs. So the way that the Golden Triangle is set up currently, Woodlands County, as well as the town of Whitecourt, Greenview County, Fox Creek, Big Hills County, and Swan Hills all contribute $15,000 per year. So they have a $90,000 a year annual working budget, and then we work with the 3 snowmobile clubs the trailblazers, the snow goers, and the other snow goers, in order to basically formulate and work out a trail management plan as well as a marketing plan all around snowmobile. So that's what leads us to kind of the Golden Triangle. So they have an annual event where they have a big snowmobile rally, and we're actually we have Councillor Dean is the official Woodlands County appointee to our Golden Triangle working committee. But I work very closely with Cindy Brooks on that as we put together the meeting packages and work through some of the information. So we have that mechanism and all of that background in place with the Golden Triangle. When it comes to working with and setting up something like that as a working plan for other groups, again, we could probably build an entire meeting around that. And I think that's a great idea for us to park and to move forward.
For sure. Like, I've sled the trails here for years, and like, it's just one of those things. So they have some of the best trails in the area that sit unused for 6 months of the year. You know, I'm sure there's partnerships that could be made. You would hope that we could leverage some of these areas.
Well, and this is where it's interesting now, having that new trails plan in place from the province, and seeing how some of the backwoods trail licensing and all of that is working now too. And so, yeah, we could have a whole meeting on trails and how we can develop and do some of that. And one of the things that, you know, Councillor Prestige, you've been on council long enough, I mean, if you want to address this, but as we've gone through the restructuring of the county administration, we did basically phase out our recreation program. So we currently have recreation assets, but we're currently at the county level. We don't have the assets or resources or even staff in place to promote those. They're maintained, but that's really about where we're at right now with the Blue Ridge Rec area, with Schumann Lake, with some of the others. We maintain and we operate those facilities, but we're not really actively marketing or anything like that. So we know there's a gap there.
I think the problem we have with recreation, like, we have these areas and they cost us a lot of money,
Absolutely.
but there's no direct benefit for the county by doing this. Like, people come, they go snowmobiling, they go to the town. We don't, well, I'm not gonna say none, very little of the businesses in the county reap any rewards for that.
Yes, I agree, under the current structure. But in looking at it with our private campgrounds, you know, for example, when I think of some of the areas, like even in the Grow Creek area, escaping me off the top of my head the name, but the campground that's out there, so that's one area where they're bringing in private. Also Fort Assiniboine, the campground there. You know, I think that there's definitely a lot of these people that aren't staying in hotels that want to stay at these campsites. And if we get a session like that, maybe it's something with a municipal-private collaboration. And for example, if running these places are expensive, for example, like Hard Luck Canyon, I'm sure that we have a cost to service the areas at Hard Luck Canyon. And just recently, there was a development approved, from what I understand, to build cabins out there. Well, if that's a campground type thing, whatever it is, maybe there's a mechanism where we put that out to tender and somebody wants to commercialize that area a little bit and look after those. So there might be a partnership in place.
We haven't approved the development permit yet. All we did was approve rezoning it to recreation.
Oh, I see. Gotcha. But just thinking of those going forward, some of these kind of areas like Grow Creek, for example, you know, like,
That's what we want to see, is businesses start up in the county that are going to benefit from, like, the snowmobile trails or going fishing at the lakes, that benefit from the money that the county puts in, so that our residents can benefit from it.
absolutely. I think it's just important to add that we don't be in competition with, I think as the county as well, in running some of these areas, we have to make sure we're not directly competing with the businesses we're trying to support.
Exactly.
So,
Go ahead, Peter.
Well, I was just wondering, how does Goose Lake Recreation work there? I'm not familiar with it. They haven't had a meeting yet, so.
Goose Lake is, I believe it's through the community league there.
Okay.
See, like that is a good example there. The community league does the campground and RV park. And they never come to the county asking for money, because the way they have it, they generate their own money through the campground.
Right.
And it's full all the time.
And the Groat Creek recreational area was closed for COVID and for quite some time. But it's reopened now.
Yeah.
But also just down the road from that, we have Goodwin Meadows, which is
Yes.
a campground, and then we also have the one family that runs a campground just around the corner from that, and they're fairly well serviced and used. So I don't think we're competing with those groups, but there is a family component to the Groat Creek thing that has attracted some larger gatherings there, and it seems to have run very well. I thought it was a great addition actually to the counties, especially out at that end of the county.
Yeah, I've been to that location. That's actually, to me, a great example of spin-off. So for example, for a wedding that was at that location, I know they hired, there was a private sales kind of party thing that was out there. I know, there was a cake sourced locally for the wedding kind of thing. So these are spin-offs that are putting dollars in our residents' pockets. So those types of businesses are incredibly important. And that's where I'm wondering, that's exactly the kind of thing that I was, getting at, is how do we support them and help them grow? Like, can the Snowmobile Association or the ATV Association get all these members at the table, along with whoever, is looking after how much expense are we putting into Hard Luck Canyon, Groat Creek, and is there an opportunity to collaborate with these groups and make them profitable for all?
Yeah,
And then it takes-
Westward has done the community center out there has done phenomenal at attracting some of these major events, not just the rodeo, but
Exactly.
the mud boggers have
Oh,
been
yeah.
out there, and then
The
the
Christmas market was
Gilkin.
just last weekend, and I understand that went very well. We
Yeah.
did provide a fair bit of county support for that.
And that's all, and a lot of those dollars are all spent here locally. And the other campground escapes me, just down the road from that, they were booked right full.
Yeah.
And so.
It was an interesting year for campgrounds, and my understanding from talking to a couple of the campground operators, so the Fort Assiniboine Campground and RV Park, he's moved entirely to seasonal. And part of what pushed him to go entirely to seasonal camping was, for a while, this summer was different because everything was open during most of the camping season. But early in the season, you couldn't have your public washrooms available to everybody. And so it led everybody to be, well, you can go camping as long as you're self-contained, because you can't use a communal shower, right? And so that was part of the thing. So, I mean, overall, with the economy being open as it was a fantastic year for camping. From what we heard, everybody was pretty much booked up, and I think even our group camping, we had folks back doing our group camping and that kind of thing again this year, I think, once we were able to open. We'll wait and see what comes next year. But yeah, I mean, it just, it seemed like this year was just a massive influx of folks once again. And Councillor Preston, you hit the nail right on the head. It comes back to that big tenet that we have is, how do you leverage public infrastructure and public investment so that you can get private investment? And key question.
We also had a lot of overflow,
Oh, no,
overflow onto public land along the McLeod River on the loop down there. They were camping there last week. The snow came and
That's become a provincial problem though, because I know that any campground that you try to book, you just can't book in the summertime. It's just almost, you have to start in January if you want, you gotta plan. So there's lots of opportunity there.
One last,
Just a quick shout out to the board for the West Ridge Community Hall, and speaking to the lady who organizes the Christmas fair. In order to have the 60 booths, they need to set up partitions rather than just having 20. And she said we would have ran a deficit if the board didn't come out and pay for the cubicles. So she said that was huge. So I thought I'd just give them a little shout out. I'm looking at the camera.
Were they bulletproof?
Exactly. So which is really good to know.
Can we get a motion on this? Move on?
To accept as information?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Hey, Art's moving for discussion?
Thank you.
Call the question?
all in favor?
Good. Next is our blue sky discussion.
Okay, so with the agenda set up the way that we have it organized, the blue sky is the area where we have that ability to put things that, you know, they're not really information items, but they're things that the committee should know and understand. Or there may be really cool ideas that we might be able to, as they say, R&D or rob and duplicate and kind of put within our county. Or in the case of item B, it's maybe a massive international summit that could have life-changing effects for all of us. Really the idea is with Blue Sky, the agenda, of course, is always open for all committee members to put any items on and anything on that you might want us to discuss. But being the guy that I am, I'd love to have a place where I can park wacky, crazy ideas if I need to. So that's where the Blue Sky kind of serves me nicely. The two items that are there, the Greenview Industrial Gateway, huge announcement for the MD of Greenview. And just to kind of give a bit of background, I mean, I'm not kind of fully versed in it, but the Greenview Industrial Gateway is a designated industrial development area that they've come through after years of planning and designating land use. They have a designated area. We've seen the Alberta one Alberta one geothermal project be located at that site. Now this is the second big one. As the Duvernay field continues to develop, I mean, we know that Grand Prairie is kind of central to that Duvernay, Montney kind of thing, and this is just one of those investments that just made absolute sense on that site because of the years of planning and development work and everything that went into it. So good on Greenview, and as those pipelines run through Woodlands, good on us because we know it all grows together, right? And then for item B, of course, the Glasgow Conference, still waiting to wrap my head around their final closing announcements and all of that. But it was interesting in the first 3 days of the conference. I mean, you know, day one, they're talking about energy, and we've got our Prime Minister there and talking about how Canada itself is a victim of climate change with the fire in BC and all of that. And I'm sure with the flooding in other parts of BC, you'd have more to say this week. But certainly lots of conversation there about the detrimental aspects of climate change to start with, that Canada is looking forward to doing a cap on emissions. And I was really happy to hear that it was emissions and not production, because a cap on production is a completely different thing that we would have to consider within the oil and gas industry for our companies here. There's a forestation treaty that was signed as well on day two, and I don't think that's going to have a large effect on us because managed forests are not part of that. But where there might be some considerations, and I'm not quite sure, I'm literally jumping to the edge of the cliff by saying this. I'm concerned with that it might limit further opportunity for us to convert green forest land into developable land. And for us as the county in areas further north of us, that could be an absolutely huge detriment to any further development. If you can't convert any forest or any public land to industrial, you're dealing with only your white land base as it exists today. I don't know if that's what the outcome is, but that was my biggest fear that sort of came out of that. And then the other part of it is just, you know, the whole conversation around, as we've talked about, hydrogen and carbon sequestration and all of those things. The Canadian carbon trading plan is now being looked at quite seriously, I understand, as a model by a number of other countries, so we'll wait and see where that part of it goes. But it just gives more impetus for us to, whether we like it or not, understand how that carbon trading system works, and as has been mentioned, how it might affect ag and forestry and all of that going forward. So that was it for the blue sky stuff.
Seeing we're getting later in the meeting here, and if we have any discussion, kind of keep it short. Any discussion? Okay, need a motion to accept it as information.
I'll make that motion to accept it as information.
Any discussion? Call the question, all in favor? Information items.
Okay, so these are some of those more concrete kind of information things, and to a large extent generated from the government of Alberta and from some other sources as well. But a shout out to Christy Tutz and to Cami Curry for keeping us updated and sending this part of information out, as well as with this one, Community Futures, because they've got a couple of really good upcoming courses on the CF side of things as well. I can dive into any of them in great detail if you want me to, but ideally it's just updates on labor force, on the economic review, information there on the Trails Act, on the hydrogen roadmap, on those 3 upcoming Community Futures events. If there's any questions on any of that, happy to field those.
Any questions?
Straightforward.
What is the Northwest Regional Connector?
So it's just kind of a weekly newsletter that she puts out. If you, as you go through the package, page 94 is where it starts. So what she does is she sends an email, and it just gives links on a number of the sort of open provincial programs and funding envelopes. So as you go through there, there's information and links for the Alberta Jobs Now program, the Civil Society Fund, the Alberta Innovates, there's an update there on biofiber, a little bit of talk about the Business Link, because they now have increased their resources around being able to work online with the Business Link. And what's interesting is, you know, as we were talking about our directories, both the Business Link and our Whitecourt Chamber now have online markets where you can list your business and have your business available there as well. And so then there's the Driving Back to Work program, which is the program around the Class 1A truck driver training. You know, you kind of go through it item by item. The one item that's here that we're doing some serious exploration of around that Wild Alberta project that I mentioned is that tourism relief fund in Western Canada. If there's a way for us to be able to leverage some money out of that fund to help us leverage the budget as we spin Wild off as its own entity, that's something that we're interested in doing, but that would likely come through. In the past, when we've received federal tourism funding, it has to come from an existing entity, and so it would likely be an application that the RETA would submit. So the money would flow through the RETA, but we would, through that, help to spin Wild off. That's what we started to talk about on Monday of this week. So
Tricia?
that
sorry.
hopefully covers some of that.
I'd just like to add that for the items that are contained in here, like the way that they're set up, these would be great Facebook posts. So for for Woodlands County website, just getting this information out there, because there's, again, like the Alberta Jobs Now program. So that's one some people haven't heard about, or how to get the information out more quickly. So also just with the tourism and even the Drivers Now, you know.
So I completely agree with you, and this is part of the ongoing conversation Nikita and I have. And Nikita does a fantastic job of leveraging about 50 demands a day for us, for Facebook posts and updates, down to a manageable 3 or 4. And so I love that you brought the idea, because finding a great path on how we can better communicate out some of the information that we present to the committee is something that I think we kind of need to explore. And so as a parking lot idea, we can leverage our Facebook a little bit, but the problem is that if we mention every single thing, it just gets overwhelming, and the volume it doesn't become meaningful when people are getting 10 posts a day from the county, right? And so it's a matter of how do we manage the information flow is the big question, and it's a great topic for us to discuss.
Might be worth having a separate one specifically for economic development.
Again, we've got some commentary on that from administration too, but again, tip of the spear, happy to go wherever you want us to go.
And whoever's doing the Facebook it's been great, because I noticed the last while there is a lot more, oh, well, great job. There's been a lot more posts and I see more engagement. Yeah, so.
We've seen, I think, incredible gains made through our communications. Corinne Scott is our communications officer, who's away on maternity leave right now. But through Corinne and then Nikita filling in for her while she's away, county communications are better, I think, than they ever have been. And we work together, as you can see with, the executive producer. We work together pretty closely. So.
I acknowledge those after hours posts too. I noticed those. They weren't just 9 to 5.
But I think that's a wonderful parking lot idea, or a wonderful comment for us to take to a strategic planning session, or even bring forward at a current meeting on information flow and how we can manage getting information out more routinely.
That's all I had.
Okay, can I get a motion on that?
I'll make a motion to accept the information items as
Crystal makes that motion. Any discussion?
So that was motion to approve from Crystal?
Yes.
Thank you. Sorry, Crystal, I don't know if it was the barrier or whether I was just not listening, but I didn't hear you very well. Okay, there we go, and then
we have to call.
Take note of that parking lot idea as well.
Call the question. All in favor? Now we go to in-committee session. Do we have anything, Bert?
Excuse me.
Yes, we do have a couple of in-committee
Okay,
items.
we just have to wait to go offline.
Yes, and so what I would like to do at this point, I know we could actually come back on afterwards in order to do the meeting close and all of that, but I'm just thinking, before we go to the in-committee, if we can almost just go down to that next agenda item, which is to pick our next meeting date. And then that way after we close on the in-committee, unless we have any motions going forward, we can capture those in the minutes, but I think we would be okay. And then we can have Nikita go to lunch and to do his other duties for the day. But for under the...
Is it not December 16th?
Yeah, so I'm curious to know, is this a good time? Does this Thursday morning, every third Thursday kind of work for everybody? Is that a fair way for us to proceed?
Works for me.
I would like to keep our meetings to a maximum of 4 hours, because people have jobs to go to and everything, so if we need more time, we have to get put off to another meeting.
Okay.
Okay, so with that.
Yeah, I'm good.
Oh, okay, so then, we'll set, December, is it the 18th? No, not the 18th.
16th.
Thank you. So December 16th, 9 a.m. to noon is our next meeting date. That should be perfect. And then, I think that's it. I don't think there's anything else that we need to mention now. And then if we have a motion to go in committee, we can certainly do that. And then we'll we'll start to work over the building committee items through from there.
Okay, I need a motion to go in committee.
I'll move that we go in committee.
Peter makes that motion. Okay, Nikita, you can stop the
Okay, perfect, and with that, we'll stop the recording. Thank